I want to thank everybody for coming this evening for our work session, April 20th, 2021. At this time, Ms. Kinzer, will you call the roll?
Ms. Parker? Ms. Kinzer's here. Ms. Hopkins? Mr. Fulbright?
Here.
Mr. Moore? Ms. Irvin? Here. Mr. Sims? Here. Mr. Hooper? Mr. Howell? Here. Mr. Lindsay? Mr. Dudley's absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you. One thing I would like to ask the board's permission on is before we go much farther into the agenda, we do have several people that are here, and one school board member has asked me to include an item, and I think a lot of people may have to leave early, so I want to move that item up to the very first thing on our agenda, and that is item 4 under other business, the track for Central High School in Whitthorne. I'd like to move that discussion up in front of Mr. Laconin. Is there any objection to that being done? Okay. We don't do anything with the consent items on here, do we? Minutes, school trips, use of facilities? If not, then we will turn it over to Ms. Parker. I'll let you have the floor and introduce this discussion.
All right. Thank you for this opportunity. We've got several visitors here tonight to talk to us about the track situation at Central and at Whitthorne. I think they have two very strong programs, but they're doing it with the help of Columbia State, the track that exists there. We've heard from members before about the difficulty of students, particularly middle schoolers and ninth graders that don't drive, getting to practice. I think that there's been conversations about potentially putting it behind Central. I will say that in my discussions, I don't want to potentially add something that would take away from an existing field, and I think there's the potential that it would cut into a soccer field that's back there, and I know that soccer team's worked really hard on that. I have talked with Mr. Spencer just to see if it was possible, since both schools work together, if there could be something that could be in between Whitthorne and Central. There's a lot of dead green space if you drive past Downline Parkway between Baker, Central, and Whitthorne, and so Mr. Spencer was kind enough to do a drawing that shows that it could go there either horizontally or vertically in that area. So with all that being said, I didn't ask for any cost estimates or anything like that from them, but I wanted to give the coaches and parents or students that are participating the opportunity to kind of say why it's so needed for their sport. So I guess I'll turn it over first to, which one of y'all wants to go first? Ms. Kearney, and she is the new track coach for Whitthorne.
And just to clarify, this really isn't a public discussion time, but Ms. Parker's asked for some information to be shared, and that's why we are allowing members to speak. So, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, thank you for adding us to your work session tonight, and thank you for moving us up on your agenda. I just want to say this is my first year coaching the track team, and it has been wonderful. It's so exciting to see the potential that these kids have in our community. We're here to ask you to build a track for them. You guys have approved your athletic standards, and I've gone through the athletic standards, and we're not meeting those standards. So my kids have to get to Columbia State track. I have actually painted lines in the back of Whitthorne's parking lot so we can practice there a couple of days a week and not have to go to Columbia State because our parents work. They can't leave work to come get their kids, and sometimes the kids will walk. Hampshire Pike is a federal highway. We shouldn't have our kids walking down Hampshire Pike. So we have got some students here, parents here, and the Central High School coach here that would like to speak to you about why it is so important for us, our teams, and our communities. So we're going to start with Mr. Andy Moore will speak, and then Kamarian Frierson will follow him.
Good evening. Thank y'all. My name is Andy Moore, and I'm the parent of 3 children here in town, and one of them runs track for Central. This has been a new experience for me, watching my child run track, but also discovering these other children, these young men and women, and what they can do and what they're actually accomplishing. Like many of you, I mean, I never ran track, so this is, a new experience for me, but, I was aware of Columbia State's facilities. It's, adequate. I've been out there to run and walk. But when I really started seeing these kids train out there, I soon realized, there weren't adequate places to get properly dressed, to use the restroom, even though the restroom situation has been at least addressed at this point. But more importantly, even the standards that have been set for these facilities, we have the nice football fields, baseball fields, but we don't have a track. Track is such a fantastic sport that does cross-pollinate, that benefits these other sports. But, more importantly, it's not just the success that these kids are having this year, which they are having that. I mean, school records are being broken. I mean, there's students are going to be representing Columbia at the state track meet. But probably the coolest thing for me, this past weekend, I saw a young man, Roman Woodson. I don't even know if he's in here tonight. And if y'all don't know who Roman is, he's a senior at Central. He doesn't know I'm going to even say this. But I saw him jump 24 feet in the long jump. And if you look that up in like any SEC record, that's basically D1 level. The world record's like 28 feet. This kid is a great example of these other kids that are here that could potentially benefit from having a resource such as a track in Columbia, because it might mean a different opportunity for college. I mean, who knows? We might have an Olympian, in our room right now and don't even know it. So, having this from a parental perspective is very important, and also a sense of pride for these kids to represent their community, on their home field track. If you go to the other tracks that are in the community, I mean, they're impressive. We're very fortunate that we have something here in the area, but it's time that we look at doing something serious for these children. These young children will benefit from that, and so will our community. So, thank y'all.
Ms. Parker, oh, okay.
All right. Good evening. My name is Kamarian Frierson, and I am a 13-year-old in the 8th grade, and I attend Woodthorne Middle School, where I am a proud member of their track team. So I come forward to you today and asking why a track would be beneficial for me and my team, and let's not forget my 4 siblings behind me. Being on the track team has brought so much joy, and it really helps me concentrate with my grades and have better social skills. Going into the 9th grade, I see my next 4 years going by super fast. While that is happening, I want to take time to take my track career to the next level. The only way I can do that is having a track at Central High School. My mom has to leave work early every time we practice. It takes her a very long 20 minutes to get to me, sometimes even longer because she works out of town a lot. And this is not helping me get my track scholarship. This track will be so close that I could run to it 10 times in 10 minutes, and that will definitely help my run time and my mom's gas tank. I promise you this will be beneficial to me and my future runners. Please consider building us a track. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Parker, do you have any, do we have one more, or is it just one more?
This is Talis Steele. He is the coach at Central High School.
Okay, thank you.
How you doing, gentlemen and ladies? It's good to be here. I've been coaching for 11 and a half years within Williamson County, 7.5 years, 4 years at Columbia Central High School. I've coached multiple state champions from the 200-meter to decathlon, triple jumpers, high jumpers. Kids have gone on to Missouri, Duke, Belmont, Trevecca. I've been able to coach and do a lot within the community. And when I moved back home, I was born and raised here, graduated here in 1999. I moved back home and I noticed we were doing the same things 20 years ago. I don't know about you guys, but I've never known any business or anything to do the same structure for 20 years without some type of progress. Now, also with that being said, even though 20 years have passed, Columbia has no, Murray County, let me rephrase that, has no full-service track facility in its county. And that's what really spurred my interest to stay here and coach full-time and be a head coach, because I knew the talent that was here. I even got additional training out in Arizona because I wanted to train with Olympic athletes, because I knew we had Olympic athletes here in Columbia, Tennessee, if only they had the resources and somebody to coach them. So I said, well, I will become the coach. Hopefully we will get the resources at some point in time. I feel like this is an opportunity that we know we have the resources available, that if we utilize them purposefully, that we will give our kids not just future Olympians, but kids that just want the fundamental basics of running and jumping, which is a fundamental thing. That is something that crosses the lines in any sports, is very low cost, right? Running and jumping. You get some shoes, you get some shorts, you get a shirt and a bottle of water, and you can go at it. And we have an opportunity to put that type of facility to start our kids from the ground up. This not only impacts Central, it impacts Baker Elementary and Whitthorne Middle School. All three schools can have access and share that track in that facility. So we give these kids an opportunity to get self-awareness. They get to get some self-esteem about themselves, be a part of a group or a team. Because the thing about track is that it crosses all socioeconomics. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It doesn't matter what color you are, what religion you are, what gender you are, right? Baseball can only take so many kids, and it only takes guys. Softball can only take so many kids. It only takes girls, right? Spring sports are very limited to what our kids can do, except for one, and that is track and field. That's what makes it so unique. We can have 100, 200 kids on a team at a time. Now, keep in mind, with that being said, we've never done this in Murray County. So Columbia Academy doesn't have a full-service track facility. Zion doesn't have a full-service track facility. I mention that because they're private schools. So we would think private schools, they have a little bit different funding. They will have more resources. But, guys, not one school in Murray County, and what I mean by full service, pole vault pit, high jump, triple jump, long jump, bleachers, restrooms, fully serviced track, infield. So not one place, again, in Murray County has that. Now, I can take the kids to Hickman County. I can take them to Giles County. I can take them to Dixon. We can go to Murfreesboro, Williamson County. I can take them to any surrounding county, and at least one school in that county has that. We do not have it. Since 1968, when the gravel was laid at the back infield at Columbia Central High School, that was supposed to be a track. It was denied in 1968 to get paved to be a track. So we have gone on this battle for over 50 years. So it comes to a point to where, as me as a coach and seeing the talent, seeing these kids, seeing them give their all, and I say, what are we as a community giving them? I mean, we ask them to walk to track practice on a federal highway. They don't have a place to change or use a restroom unless somebody allows them to do so at Columbia State. We don't have bus transportation to take them to the track to get there, so the kids, even my kids, have to travel together. Not sure about you guys, but I don't want about 5 or 6 kids, teenagers, in a car at one time, driving on their phones, talking, and all the distractions that they have. But we have an opportunity to where these kids can safely walk to a facility, to their own track, have a sense of pride, sense of community, and knowing that we did something to change the structure of our county, because this is something we do not have in our county. So I always ask, I said, well, what does it take? Because it seems like it's a lot of times it's either fear or death. So does it take one of our kids getting kidnapped? Does it take one of our kids getting hit by a car? What does it take for us to say that that child's life was worth us finally doing this in our county? Because we now, again, have the resources. We're not meeting the standards. We're just not meeting the standards. And also, we just don't have it. And these kids and parents, they're giving everything they got. Even me as a coach, I'm a non-faculty coach, so I run my own business, and I give up my time and money to come coach because that's how valuable these kids are to me, that I will give up 3 hours of my work day, 5 days a week, and even on Sundays, because I know what a Lillian Moore can do, what a Roman Woodson can do. You know, these kids, they give you everything they got. And they're asking us only for a simple thing that is the fundamental resource of any school, which is running and jumping. And a track provides that for us. So I just want to say thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I hope that weighs on us as we continue to move forward in the county. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Parker, do you have anything? I've got a couple questions I want to ask, but do you have anything you'd like to add to the discussion?
I know both these coaches very well. I will say I don't have a child that participates in track, but just from the conversations that I've had with them, the impact that this has on their students, that's, to me, that's the big thing. I know my husband always says you don't come to see your child take a test. Academics are very important, but there is participation. I actually went to the track meet that was hosted at Columbia State, and Columbia State is it's a good facility. But the problem is, when they hosted that 2-day track meet, they didn't have access to bathrooms until the Whitthorne coach called the baseball coach at Columbia State and said, "Can you please let us in?" There's no way of funneling people in, admission, any of that. Anybody and everybody could walk up there. Mr. Moore mentioned Roman Woodson. Actually, after the meet, I went over and looked at the long jump pit. I was thinking, okay, when you drive by Columbia State, it looks very nice. It's got holes. It's like he's running down the lane and jumping over potholes, or running over potholes, because the rubberized material is actually, like, coming up. So my whole thing is, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. I've been asking for this for 2 years, and I think these kids, I think they deserve it. I think it helps them academically, I think it helps them socially, and I think we're talking about a school that collectively has over 2,500 students, and the potential is endless for what these kids can do. So I just hope we give them the resources to let them reach their full potential.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask Mr. Perriman or Mr. Pointer, either one of you, has this made it to our list of needs or wants or capital improvements?
It was not presented in the list that was given to you for capital improvements. The $660,000 for athletics was to upgrade and bring up to those standards that were mentioned our current facilities.
Well, I guess that kind of takes us to, if we want to try to roll this into, Mr. Howe, you go ahead.
So I can speak a little bit to the plan. It is on the plan. I don't know where it is priority-wise, but it is on a plan. Mr. Pointer, it's like a $15 million plan that we have put together.
I'll just add that maybe the runway for the long jump looks like that because of West 7th. It would be a good practice facility to get used to running on that. All right, anyway, back to serious business.
So it's roughly about $15 million. I mean, we're talking about $3 million roughly a year. A track definitely is in the priority. The track is definitely something that we needed. Obviously, it was not looked at from the capital standpoint just because we're not understanding of where the funding stream is. But a full-service track is definitely something that is a priority and that we do not have in our county.
And in that plan, so far, we have allocated, as a board, $500,000, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So, and I guess that's where I'm at is, we have a plan. It's in the plan. I have no problem asking for it, but I kind of would like to see it accelerated because even that plan, it's improving upon existing facilities that we currently have. We currently have soccer fields scattered across our county. We currently have baseball fields and football fields, and those schools have those sports. Are they the best? By no means are they. Are they getting there? Yeah, every day, a little bit better every day. But this is a facility that we don't have anywhere in the county except for Spring Hill Middle has a track.
But not
it's not a full
service.
Correct. And I believe that Battle Creek has plans for a track, but again, it would not be full service. So I do think that this is something we should look at. How many track teams do we have across the county?
1, 2, 6 or 7, I think.
So we have 6 or 7 track teams, and they just practice or use whatever facilities that they can.
Hallways, parking lots.
Correct. So
Grassy
yeah, I think
lots.
this is something that we should definitely look at.
Thank you. How much in that plan was allocated, or estimated rather, for a track facility as described?
You talking about full service?
Yeah,
I mean, we'd have to get final pricing. I mean,
just a rough estimate, because I'm sure it was in the plan somewhere, wasn't it? Or were there no prices included?
I don't, so, this is a different plan. We haven't even discussed this with Mr. Pointer. Ms. Parker and I, just in jest, had discussed something like this, because the original plan had it behind Central High School up on a hill where we would have to basically cut into a bank to create that, which is probably a cheaper option. However, there is an existing field there that is currently used by another sport. We have a lot of unused land. I drive by, I patrol that area quite frequently, and I drive through there quite a bit, and it's a lot of land that's just kind of sitting there. I know that the construction management program uses a very tiny portion of that land, so I feel like that there's a lot of land right there that we could complete a whole track, and it would never impact another sport. So, to be honest, I don't think you have an estimate probably for this plan at all.
Not for that
Yeah,
one.
because you weren't aware of it.
All right, Mr. Moore.
I mean, that was the same question I had. I mean, just as we continue to talk about this, it'd be nice to know generally what a track facility costs. Look, I mean, just functionally, as we've talked about bringing facilities up to the standard we've set, I think this clearly should be on the radar of having these kind of facilities at Central High School in some capacity. So I just would like for us to continue to discuss it and find out kind of what our options are and what the costs are, and then we can weigh that out.
And I would ask, what we would need from you guys is, and I'm hearing the term full service tonight, or a fully functional athletic facility. When we've looked at this and we've talked with Mr. Spencer, like Ms. Parker has, we've had it measured out. We've had discussions of, even at one point, we were told, hey, a 4-lane track would be good. And that's what we've got to know is, what are we being tasked with pricing you? Because they gave us some price ranges, and depending on the size, depending on the surface, depending on whether it's a full facility or just a track, that's going to really determine the price variance of what we're looking at in there. So with you guys, that's what we would need just to bring back to you.
I'm no track expert, obviously. I would say maybe call the coach at Central and just spend a few minutes saying, what would this look like, and what questions do I need to ask? I mean, that's what, and then you could bring us a price and just kind of a rough, we're talking rough estimates right now anyway.
And then I've had lengthy conversations with Talis regarding track, so I can provide that information to him pretty ready.
Well, then that may already be taken care of. We just need to. Okay. Mr. Lindsay.
I might can give a little bit of a round number. Probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, some of you guys were on the board then. Actually, Columbia Central approached Murray County Parks, which is the place that pays my bills at home, about constructing a track there. And at the time, there was some leftover monies from the construction of Columbia Central High School. I don't remember exactly what the numbers were, but we actually went pretty in depth. I actually had some civil engineering work done. They came and spoke with some contractors who at the time had recently built some tracks at high schools. And the number, we actually came and presented to this board and got ran out of here rather quickly. But the number was somewhere in the neighborhood of $900,000, if I remember. And that was again 4 or 5 years ago. So things have changed obviously. But that would have been an 8-lane track, and I think I even remember at the time we were talking about a track and a, soccer facility because soccer didn't have anywhere to practice, and so this was even a lighted infield and those type things. So, I think, 900 to $1 million, so, that's a round number, just to think about. And of course contractors are they're not gonna wanna give us they're gonna give us a number with a caveat depending on how much dirt work has to be done, blah, 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 all that stuff. So, and I'll just, add to, we've done a very poor job in Murray County for the history of Murray County when it comes to athletic facilities. We can go around to every school, except Battle Creek and except Spring Hill Middle, and I'm not saying that begrudgingly. We finally did something right, or attempted to do something right, but, you can go to Mount Pleasant and look at the baseball field. It was built totally by volunteers. You can go to the baseball field at Columbia Central, the softball field at Columbia Central. It was built, except for the bathroom at Columbia Central and the lights on the baseball field, everything else, there's no county dollars in. And I was talking to somebody this week. I played the first game at Spring Hill High School's baseball field, and it looks a ton different today than it did then. But we played that game with no dugouts and just prayed that we didn't take one to the teeth. But and we can go on and on and on. But we've done a poor job. We want to celebrate when our athletic teams do well, and we want to brag on them and pat them on the back. But really, we've not done a good job of putting our money where our mouth is, and it's time we do that, long past time. But along those lines, I never talk about anything without talk about funding. But before I would like to take this a step further, rather than just asking for as a capital request. I would like for us to look at our fund balance. I noticed today, looking at our financials, we've taken in $1.6 million more in property tax than we had budgeted, and we know sales tax, it just keeps climbing every day. So I think that, and Doug may disagree with me, and if he does, that's fine. He can speak up right now. But I think that we have a possibility, there is a chance moving forward in the next few months, especially as we see things materialize and as we get closer to the end of fiscal year, that maybe this is something we can do without having to ask the county commission to fund. Maybe we could pull, and not just this, there's $15 million, as you guys just said. I mean, I think there's going to be a possibility of fund balance that we can actually improve some of our athletic facilities. But Doug, if you want to comment on that, you can.
Okay. With us trying to save on expenditures, we could see money go into the fund balance, but it's truly up to the department heads and their budgets on whether they fully expend what they have budgeted to spend on the school district. If they do spend every single cent in their budget, which is unlikely, we could see us come in at a deficit, but our fund balance has performed well to this point, to the point that we could fund our budget, which is currently just above or just under a $931,000 deficit as presented tonight, and then depending on the cost of the track and the facility we're looking at would really determine whether you can take all of the funds out of fund balance or not. We are toting a fine line in which it depends on how much we take out of there. If we were to take out around $3 million, we could risk going negative in cash in October. So that's just something to look at, and part of that is the $900,000 built into our budget, and we're hoping to receive funding from other sources in our estimate. So I do think you're right. I think things could come available in the next couple months as we continue to work through our budget process. But as of right now, it just depends on how much. If the track is $2 million, then I've got to tell you no, just to protect you from yourself. So.
All right, thank you.
Well, I don't want to end on that. But today you would tell us not to spend $2 million. That doesn't mean that come June 1st or May 15th, Doug's a lot more cautious than I am, if you haven't noticed. But even fund balance projection for in this agenda that we have was somewhere in $12 million range. That 3% rules a little over $3 million. So Doug might lose some sleep, but I think that we can find the money.
If we do a tax anticipation note, we'd make it.
I'm all for tax anticipation notes, so.
Okay.
But I think it'd be worthwhile for them to bring us some information back and have further conversation.
Well, and that's what I was gonna mention. I don't know that we could really discuss on how to fund it if we don't even know how much we're funding. I think that'll make the determination. Ms. Parker?
I just wanted to also say, as long as I was on the board up until Dr. Marzak, we did do tax anticipation notes all the time. It was routine. I'm not really sure why we got away from it, so I would certainly not oppose doing something like that. The other thing is, I think Mr. Perryman asked what we would be looking for, and to me, we're looking at fitting the standards. So if the standard calls for a 6-lane track, then I think we should have a 6-lane track. I don't think anybody wants anything more or anything less than what the expectation is. And I don't think I think that the standards were set by us with the idea that it would, that it was reasonable, it was something that we could eventually get to. Part of doing that, though, really comes from either staff has got to take an active role in making sure that $15 million, that $15 million plan, those standards were adopted in June of 2019. We obviously didn't do anything last year because of COVID, but that means we are essentially 2 years behind making anything aside from $500,000 towards $15 million that could potentially be needed throughout the district. I also would say, when we talk about funding sources, we're getting a lot of money dropped on us from ESSER. I don't know if you can call it an outdoor classroom. I don't know if you could talk about mental health. But there's a lot of things that I think you could do with that money, and I think it would be beneficial. I don't think money should be a hindrance to us at this point. I think we need to figure out how we need to do this, not just at Columbia, I'll be honest, not just at the Central Whitthorne campus. Mr. Steele told me he actually had kids come out from Mount Pleasant. I think their new football coach really believes strongly in track and knows how it ties into other sports. And so, he actually has a bunch of his athletes from the football team that are now running track at Mount Pleasant, and they came to Columbia State because they'd never seen a track, and they wanted to see it before they ran on Saturday. So I don't want these kids to be intimidated. They need the basics.
And it sounds like we've kind of given the staff kind of a task of bringing us some numbers back so that we can look forward. And we can put that on it would be May, wouldn't it? May's work session. Is that okay with you guys?
Yes.
Okay. All right, any further discussion?
Let me clarify one thing.
Yes.
Do you want me to look at the entire campus, including the backfield, or just the area between Whitthorne, Baker, and Central?
Whatever would make the most sense.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
How's that for a loaded answer?
That's great.
Yeah.
No, and that was, we're talking about the standards because Mr. Pointer said the standards would include bleachers, lighting, and bathrooms. And then our question to you, and I guess what we will bring to you as well, is the field in the middle. Does it make sense while you're doing that to go ahead and address some sort of playing surface in the middle of that they don't currently have for soccer or something like that?
Depends on the prices.
We will bring you with or without, if that's okay with you.
That would be great. Mr. Howe.
Is that gonna hinder a full track? You're talking with long jumps, and I don't know any about this, but
I don't think so.
Okay, because if we're gonna do a track, I want it to be a full service track with
I think
everything that you compete in, track and field, shot put, whatever, I don't know these things, but
we would bring you that within and then that outside of as well. There's enough land to do it right there.
Okay.
We have an issue with the land that we have to solve. right there that we know, but we'll bring it either way.
I mean, if you can put a soccer field in there, that's a bonus, but I'd like to have a full track and then
Okay.
a soccer field as well, yeah.
All right, thank you very much. I think, this takes care of that discussion. Thank you for allowing it to be moved up, and thank you for those of you that shared information with us. And now we come to the highlight of our show, Mr. Laconin, financials.
I don't know if it's a highlight, but,
Well,
but
I'll give
we'll
you a
highlight it.
I'll give you a second to, get excited and get hyped up as
All
everybody filters out.
All right, we got a lot of budget amendments on the agenda.
I can't imagine why they're not staying.
If you have a question about any of the budget amendments, we're happy to answer any of those questions. And there's also drinks, cups, pizza in this room over here, and everyone is to help themselves.
It will not
except
help my
Miss
track
Kinzer.
career.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
And with the exception of Miss Kinzer, somebody will need to help her.
All right, all the budget, is there anything specific, any questions specifically that anyone has regarding any of the budget amendments? Any you would like to comment on, Mr. Lacona?
No, a lot of these are routine cleanup or things that we're moving within the line item or federal, so, what did you
Chair,
say? Would you like to talk about the...
Are we then okay with moving these to consent?
Mr. Lane, would you like to talk on the band budget amendment? Okay. We have a budget amendment for the band, equipment, so we'll let him speak.
Thank you very much, Chair and board members. The budget amendment for the Columbia Central band uniforms that are 17 years old that need to be replaced, and instruments for the middle schools. I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, where are the instruments for the high school? Well, the goal was to present this budget amendment with a request for funding for the high school programs that are desperately needed. Many of those band instruments are 20-plus years old. We do have several estimates, and we're talking about outfitting our high school bands, which is not presented in the budget amendment, but they were supposed to be a companion piece, but they are not reflective in this particular posting. So we're talking about a $546,000 purchase, which really is a 20-year purchase because of the quality of the instruments that would be purchased. Most of the middle school instruments come hand-me-down, so to speak, from the high school. They have very limited resources to purchase new instruments as needed. So the $30,000 would augment particular instruments that the middle schoolers use quite often, but that was going to be the companion piece that is not part of this process. So any other questions about the budget amendment?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Go ahead.
And this is going to sound silly, but it's a genuine question. I know each year they do the marching band does a show, and they have their own costumes and things like that. What are these uniforms differentiated from that?
Yes, these are the standard musician uniforms.
Okay.
Not necessarily what the twirlers and all of that do. They change quite a bit.
Well, I know the musicians a lot of times will have matching whatevers, but these are the kind of the standard.
These are the standard uniforms that are 17 years old.
Okay, sounds good to me. Mm-hmm. Mr. Lindsay.
What I'm about to say, I hope no one takes the wrong way. I have no problem with this at all. I'll say that first off. But this is another example of what I was just talking about, that how we in Murray County have done a poor job when it comes to extracurricular activities. We expect sports, we expect athletic teams, we expect bands, we expect all these people to fund themselves, and it's just fundamentally wrong in my opinion. I mean, band sells fruit every year, and sports teams sell Boston butts, and they sell strawberries, and this fundraiser after fundraiser, and I just think that we need, out of 103 or 107 or 108 or wherever this thing winds up, $1 million, I just think we gotta do a better job of helping out some of these extracurricular programs. So I just want to take the chance to say that, Mr. Lane, I have no problem with this at all. I think it's a step in the right direction. I hope we keep taking those steps.
Thank you very much. I don't see any further lights. Are we good to move all this to consent agenda? I see heads on my left nodding. Do I see heads on my right nodding? Okay. Moving the budget amendments to consent. Monthly financials for March.
Financials are posted on the agenda. We also have our sales tax report, which also includes an estimate. We actually got our sales tax letter for March today. It's not, it may be updated on the attachment. Let's find out. It should update on its own. So yes, it did update on its own. So once again, we beat last year's projection. We brought in $1,522,000 compared to last year's $1,360,000. So we're running about that $200,000 mark each month. So that moves our needle up as far as the projection at the end of this year, which is good to see. I did do a projection on the financials as far as where we're going to end up this year. And through March, it is basically looking like a $1.6 million deficit. But like I said, that is if we spend every single penny of our expenditure budget. The other side of that is I'm projecting that we're going to hit about 108.2 in revenue with all grant funds and coronavirus funds coming through 141. So and then expected about 109.8 in expenditures if we spend every single cent of our remaining budget. So that is currently what I'm expecting to end June with. These are conservative numbers, and with that impacting our budgetary discussion, as of right now, we do have a deficit budget proposed, but it is something that we would be able to survive. So if there are any questions about the financials, I'm happy to answer them.
As we look at the sales tax reports, that still reflects Mount Pleasant's giving us 100% of their increase at Columbia, and Spring Hill only doing the 50% of the increased portion?
That is correct, and so Mount Pleasant is rolling in, and so you can click through this document as well and see how it's divvied out between the funds. These are school funds. The Murray County Debt Service Fund, their contribution goes into this fund, so that's where Mount Pleasant goes.
Just wanted to make sure we were still doing things that way.
Yep, and then down at the bottom of the report,
Very appreciative of Mount Pleasant of approving that, by the way.
Yeah, and you can see where the sales tax or the sales volume comes and sales tax revenue from each city or also out in the county on this report as well.
Okay, thank you.
Where that occurs.
Mr. Lindsey.
I think you bring up a good point and a great discussion, Adam. And this may be tough for you to say off the cuff, Doug, but I know Spring Hill with Williamson County. You know, we voted the other night to pass and ask for our capital plan, which involved a new high school somewhere in Spring Hill. And I know when Williamson County, when they passed their sales tax increase, there was an agreement with the city of Spring Hill for a certain period of time. I don't remember, David,
3 years.
3 years.
I thought
that they would give their portion of it back to help the funding of that. Do you have any idea what their portion of the increase is? Or what you think it may be for a year?
I do have that. Hold on one second. So I have it broken down by city. Just on a monthly basis, the city of Columbia, the increase they received due to the referendum for the month of March 2021, the letter I just got was $380,444. So we get to have half of that increase because that's how much they give. So they retain $190,000 within the city. Spring Hill was $162,501. They would retain half. Murray County gives 75% of theirs. So their increase due to the referendum was $70,555. And then and this is just on total sales volume. So that's how much of sales that occurred in that jurisdiction, how much it went up due to it being 9.75% versus 9.25. And then Mount Pleasant was $21,217. So and they actually give their whole increase amount for at least the first year, and that should end in the next few months.
So just to use round numbers and sounds like the city of Spring Hill and the city of Columbia maybe are tracking pretty close, and so that referendum has increased what they're keeping their portion.
Yes.
Somewhere in the $2.5 to $3 million a year range. It sounds like.
$542,000 is what occurred in just this month, and they would keep half of that between the city of Spring Hill. So $260,000 times 12 would give you your answer. Yeah.
So just make that point. As we move forward, I don't think it's a bad practice for us to ask for the same thing Williamson County asked for.
We have asked for that.
But I think it's not a bad practice to ask for it again. That as we obviously when we maybe there's not a lot of need in it until we get a project approved. But if we're asking to build a $70 million high school, I think it's worth the shot again. So.
I think you're very, very correct in that. Thank you. And I just want to reiterate, or just for clarification, 50% that we receive, that is the minimum according to the resolution and passage. Thank you. Mr. Moore.
Yeah, if I could echo that. I mean, I know Spring Hill just elected some new aldermen and a new mayor, and I absolutely think that we as a board, if we could draft something similar to what we did last time and just request that again. I don't think it is, to be honest, I was a little disappointed that they chose not to grant the same thing that they gave to Williamson County. The reason being that they had asked beforehand. I don't think that's much of a reason, to be honest. But I think they've now had a year notice of it, so let's ask them again.
Well, and I do plan on reaching out to the newly elected mayor just to offer congratulations and bring him up to speed on what we're doing. All right, nothing else on the financials? Let's move on to instruction.
School board, this is just for your information. This year, part of our team certification team is what we use to observe and evaluate all teachers, administrators, all school employees. And as part of that, administrators have to have a teacher perception survey as part of their evaluation process. This year, what we did is we got a group of principals, since they're the ones that the survey is going to be about, and we helped create these perception surveys. One will be for the principal, one will be for the assistant principals. We've discussed this, what the intent and non-intent of this is. One of the main things that we all do know, just because your perception is not my perception, it's still your reality. So we want to make sure that principals and assistant principals will be able to see, what the perception of their staff are. And we also want to make sure that this won't be the only reason that we decide to we're going to fire you just because you had a bad survey. It'll just be used as a coaching tool and as part of their surveys. I was very proud of the hard work that the principals did put in to make sure that these surveys were completed. What they did was they used most of what the state releases for their survey for principals for their example. So once again, this was just for you to see and just for your information. And with that, I'll open to any questions. And one other thing I did forget to say, teachers will be doing this anonymously.
Okay. All right, seeing no questions or comments on that, funding for summer school, that's an item on here.
Good evening. I just wanted to give you a brief update on our progress with the summer learning. and what's been going on. Just to recap, what we've been doing with students, as you know, the state required us to come up with a plan for conducting summer learning camps for elementary and middle school students. We planned on doing that using ESSER funding. We did later on receive some state funding, and as you know, that's always with some requirements. We had to prioritize slots for students who are TANF eligible. So when we started to gain interest for the summer learning, we sent out direct emails, interest surveys to TANF eligible children to try to get a number of students that would be interested in serving, because regardless of what happened, we'd have to prioritize our services to those students. So we did that approximately a month ago. About 2 weeks after that date, we opened the survey up to other students. We're closing in. Actually, today is the last day of that 30-day window. We have captured a number of students. At the same time that we were doing that, we also sent surveys out to teachers to get interest for work. We captured those. We captured a number of teachers who said, hey, I can work a week, I can work 2 weeks, I might work. We have resurveyed those people and captured more. Our goal is to try to get a ratio of about 1 to 13 students as we serve actual classroom students. So that's all kind of closing out so far as the survey gathering information. We are now in the process of separating everything by school. We're selecting site directors, and we're now working on curriculum, what particular learning targets we're going to be working on, what curriculum we're going to use. We know basically the school day, as you know, it's going to be a 7-point-hour day. It's going to have 2 hours of math, 2 hours of ELA, 1 hour of intervention, 1 hour of recess. And then on Friday, it's stream-related science, technology, engineering, reading, and music. That'll be a stream day. So we're in the process of getting into the details of planning those days. We are still, our teacher ratio is still a little high right now. So our next step is we're reaching out to other folks, such as educational assistant survey will go out tomorrow to see who's interested there. If we still don't get to that ratio, the state has allowed us to reach out to other people who have 4-year degrees. They'll have to attend a training that's sponsored by the state. But if we get to that number and we need additional folks, we will reach out to those folks. Primarily our targets will be, of course, teachers we've had for student teaching, Columbia State students, some people like that who are in education. We would target those folks if we need them and bring them on board to assist us in reducing that. Okay. All that, of course, we have to put in all our salary information, the transportation, food service, all those things, just like we do in any other. We submit that in E-Plan. Once it's approved, we would be ready to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moore.
Okay, just a couple of questions, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around what we're doing here on all this. How many students are we talking about that we have interest in participating in this?
Right now, we have about 2,588 students that have said they're interested in going. After today, we will actually send back out to those students by direct email hey, your name, more information, are you riding the bus, will you be eating lunch, all those things like that. We'll be capturing more information from those students, because as you know, we're painting Riverside, so we'll be moving that site somewhere else. McDowell won't be open. Those students will be attending somewhere else. So capturing that information in Skyward, we can do that, but we would rather direct email and capture it, because we know some students stay with grandmother. Some students have other living arrangements in the summer. They have other contact information during the summer. So we want to make sure that we are capturing that and we have that correct.
Okay. So initially 2,500, I guess you expect that to kind of come down a little bit as people who said yes on the front end.
We anticipate that it will probably be more, because there will be students as they get to the end and get another report card, they're going to say,
fair enough.
hey, I'm failing. Also, principals and teachers will still be, if their kids, once we, we've sent those lists out, we will send those names directly back out to schools. If they see kids that aren't on the list, they will start reaching out to some other kids to say, hey, you didn't sign up, and they will encourage them to come. So I think it will increase a little bit.
Okay. So I guess my question to go with that too is, I mean, it's I guess a little concerning that it sounds like we don't have enough teachers that are interested in doing this. And I didn't know kind of how are we approaching that, because something I said when we started talking about this process was I really wanted to make sure we had a very intentional kind of goal of what we wanted to do with this program, and that the kids really got something really good out of it. So I got to be honest, when we start talking about that I could just go sign up and take a class, I mean, I like to think I'm pretty smart, but I would much prefer that these kids get a high-quality teacher that is going to give them the help they need to get them where they should be.
Well, and we want to serve every kid. In every interest survey that we sent out, we have said it's prioritized, and they may not get a slot. But as we know as a district, we are more than 50% of our kids are not proficient, so everybody could theoretically get a slot. So we're really working to try to serve.
What are we looking at to try to get? I mean, again, I'm sure that during the surveys that teachers have given a multitude of reasons why they have chosen that they maybe are not interested in this. I mean, have we tried to find out if there are ways we can entice them to help with this?
Well, one thing we know, when we increased the wage, that increased the amount of teachers that wanted to work for us. Initially when we were getting the initial survey information, we were, of course, we were waiting on more guidance from the state as to how much we could pay. And once we got that guidance, we went ahead and set a pay rate and put that out there. And it's more than most teachers make per hour, and that attracted a lot more teachers.
So they have, I mean, just so I can, again, I'm trying to get caught up on this, that they've given us caps on what we can pay for this.
Well, they said we couldn't pay more. If you look at the state range, the highest teacher's salary at the end of 20 years, whatever you divide it up by an hourly rate, you can pay more than that. So,
well, I got to say, that's disappointing to hear that we can't even take ownership of this program and perhaps do what we need to do to make sure we've got a good product coming out here. So but that's par for the course for the state.
And there may be opportunities to, supplement that with ESSER fundings. We want to use the state funding that we're eligible for first, and let ESSER come on top. So that's the kind of the methodology we're using.
Are you guys looking at options to do that? Again, I'll back up. I'm really hoping we can get teachers, preferably teachers that are already seeing these kids, in there, helping them get them where they need to be. So I would really love to hear more about, as we go through this, about how we make sure that that's taking place.
Ultimately, we, of course, given schools that are, we know Santa Fe and Riverside won't be open, and McDowell won't be open, but ultimately we want teachers at their school to serve their kids. So when we move Riverside, we intend to move that whole site to another school with the teachers that are at Riverside. That's our intent. We do have places where right now we may not have teachers that want to serve are willing to work. So and there are students that want service. So we're working through that also.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Sims.
I know in other counties they are requiring their kids to come. I've spoke to another principal in a neighboring county, and they sent letters home to parents saying your kids will be truant if they don't come during the summer. Yeah. I mean, is that something that we need to do? If our kids are failing, have we discussed that?
We haven't received any guidance that said we could require kids to come this summer. Next year, if students aren't making progress, i.e. if they haven't passed third grade, we can require them to come, or they would be retained. They would have some options.
I don't know that they needed guidance from the state to say that. I think they're just doing it. I mean, is that something that is within
It would be hard to enforce that because any summer school is not compensatory attendance. In other words, we can't do a truancy letter and it goes to the courts. The law only covers the actual school days they're supposed to come. because I asked a question similar to that and was told because it's not mandatory like the regular school year, mine was on attendance. Like, hey, these people are going to be here today, won't come tomorrow, might come the next day. I said, is there anything we can do? And they said, not really, because of that whole attendance law doesn't cover that. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
In other words, if we can say it, but there's no repercussions if they don't adhere to it, because the judges won't hear it because they really broken no law.
Okay. I just know in other counties, their superintendents sent out letters. Roughly a quarter of their students are having to attend, and they sent letters saying you would be truant if you don't come.
They were probably just using strong language, but and I hope nobody from that district listens to these. But at the end of the day, they won't have any teeth to that if the student isn't. Next year, like he said, next year, yes, we will have some bite.
Ms. Parker.
When is summer school starting?
Summer school scheduled to start June 7th.
June 7th.
Mm-hmm.
I will just say that I'm a little concerned that we're 6 weeks out and what the product is that we're going to be putting out in 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Just to really try to remediate these kids for the time that they've missed, I would have hoped that by now we really would have some concrete plans in place, some concrete lesson plans in place, a better idea of who's teaching, when they're teaching, what weeks they're teaching, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a parent. I'm already scheduling stuff for my kids for June, and my only concern is if we're not going to be prepared and we need extra time. It's my understanding that we've moved it from being in 6 or 8 week summer school to just being 4 weeks. Do we need to push it back so that we can deliver a better product and have people ready to go, and maybe do middle of June to middle of July or something along those lines? I'm real concerned about where we are.
Well, as you look at some of those other requirements too, we're still waiting on some guidance from the state. There has to be an assessment that we administer from the state to get a baseline of where kids are. If that assessment doesn't come till summertime, so far as what you addressed is as far as resetting lesson plans, we're setting up some things that we know we can do based on the data we have now. But if we have to administer assessment within that first week that the state says we have to administer and then do follow-up based on that, it's going to cause some changes. So we do have to look at those guidelines too and see where we are. But if we, I don't think we need to adjust right now. I think we're on the path. We're sending out registrations to students. That will happen either it's happening now or it'll happen tomorrow. That those will actually register. We got site directors that will come on board. We'll start to meet with those folks, and we're already planning to use some of the same curriculum products that we have now. We're planning training for educational assistants on interventions prior to that will help us not only during the summer but also during the school year. So we're moving forward with if the state doesn't provide an assessment, we already know where kids are from K-8 and iReady Math. We know where they are, and we can certainly be ready to set that up. The reading assessments, we're doing those assessments, so we've got other options to be able to address what kids need and move forward once the school year starts, or once the summer starts.
Mr. Lindsay? To kind of piggyback off what Mr. Moore and Ms. Parker said, I called Mr. Hickman yesterday and expressed some concerns to him that I'd been hearing. I've heard from several teachers that they're not interested right now because they don't really know. They don't. I had a teacher say that I don't want to say that I'm in for this if my kid is going to go to Mount Pleasant Elementary, but I'm going to be assigned to teach at Woodard, and then there's some that and I don't blame them a bit that don't want to work the whole 4 weeks. They're willing to work a week or two, and I know that was part of the plan, but it hasn't been communicated to them what their week would be, and then I also heard some feedback from parents that have answered the survey, and then they haven't received any information since they answered that survey, so they kind of feel lost, so I have to maybe agree with Mr. Moore. I'm afraid that we are going to lose some kids because, as Ms. Parker said, people are planning vacations. They're trying to make plans, and I think there's some people, both employees and parents, that are a little bit frustrated right now because they don't have all the information that they feel like they need.
Every week in the newsletter, we put an update to teachers talking about, we put a frequently asked questions out. Last week, prior to spring break, every week in the newsletter since it started, we've been updating teachers on this is what contracts are, this is what the payment are, this is when we're going to send out requests. We've been reaching out to teachers, and keep in mind, so far as the students, I remember I said earlier we had to prioritize learning to those TANF students, so we're trying to make sure that we were able to serve those. Now that we think we can serve all those kids, we're moving forward with, hey, the more details. Teachers, I've signed I don't know how many contracts, and we're going to, once we've divided up students, we're sending those. We sent those numbers out to principals last week, just for a note so they could see those numbers and encourage their schools if they had low numbers. We've got those numbers and names. The final registrations that will go directly to those people that filled out the interest survey will go out to them. We're even capturing people that have called and said, what if I don't have it? We've taken their name, and we'll send them out a registration form. So far as that part of it, we'll be able to, in the next week, know exactly what kids are there and assign those teachers and start moving forward with, like I said, our intent is for Mount Pleasant teachers to stay at Mount Pleasant. We don't intend for anybody to go anywhere, to go to another place. But the reality is that there are some places where we don't have teacher volunteers, and we will be reaching out to some teachers who are willing to go other places to work with kids. That's just a part of it, and that's a part of what we do any summer that we offer summer school. There are teachers often that volunteer to go work at another place, and we give them that opportunity.
Thank you. Ms. Irvin?
Like the others have said, it's just really hard for me to wrap my brain around it, and I'm sure it is yours as well because this is unique, but I know we've opened it up all the way up to 8th grade, and as a middle school teacher, things that would cross my mind is, if I'm a math teacher and I know we're having certain parts of the day, I don't know if we're going to have a rotation or how that's going to be, but I'm just wondering if it's a way to, and I may be overthinking it or underthinking it, I don't know, but to pinpoint it by grade, like 8th grade, this is what we're working on. We're working on this week or this hour, this block, whatever you want to do. We're doing like reading comprehension, because for instance, as a parent, there may be like a weakness in that child that they may not need the full thing, but like week 1 potentially could be ELA. Week 2 could be math, or I don't know. And I think maybe that way, and maybe like I say, I know I'm not looking at it as broadly as you guys are, but maybe if someone knows that they're going to be able to teach their curriculum that they're comfortable with, maybe that would get both more teachers and perhaps maybe target our student groups. It's just a thought that I have. I don't know.
The requirements say that we have to teach those the 2 hours of ELA, 2 hours of math. So we intend to run it just like a school schedule. There will be a specialist there. Classes will rotate. We'll sort the groups by grade level. So at a school, those grade levels will be able to rotate just like we do during a normal school day. And then we'll use other applicable staff to cover recess. So teachers will have planning time. So it'll be almost like a typical school day, with the exception of Fridays, which will be a STEM project day, the stream day. And that's where we'll work on a project every week where students will work and be able to, it's kind of a fun day, but they'll still learn something and they'll get out a little earlier.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other lights, but I'm sure you'll take all of these comments under advisement.
Sure thing.
At this time, I will let the board know we're not going to take an official pizza break, but if any of you have a hankering for pizza, Mr. Laconin.
nor county nor school funds were used to purchase this.
Thank you for that clarification.
So we kept that out of our fund balance, you know,
Thank you.
so, yeah.
With that, I'm actually gonna turn, we'll move on to zoning and facilities, and I'm gonna turn the meeting over to Ms. Kinzer while I go eat a piece of pizza.
Mr. Pearman.
Yes, ma'am. The first couple of items there are just your FYIs as normal as far as funding and, or where capital projects are in the training report. The first item that we would have that would require some sort of action is, 3.3.3. That is a bid on our intrusion and fire alarm monitoring. We did bid that out formally, and it came back to Provincia, who is our current, supplier, winning that bid. They were the only one that met all the qualifications of the bid, and they did have the low price based on that. We would recommend just to continue that relationship, and it is attached right there, the bid specs and the.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Moore?
This is kind of somewhat unrelated, but yeah, something I'd spoken with you about. I know as we went through the budget thing and we were kind of going through this, we had talked about capital requests for traditional capital requests, as well as kind of carving out sports facilities. And I know we've kind of gone back and forth with that through the last few years of how we do that. Has there been talk internally about rolling that into just rolling all of the sports thing into that general capital request? And I'll just say why, for two reasons. One, I believe, as I think most board members do, that those are just as important and should be weighted appropriately within the whole everything else we do as a district as far as capital requests. But on top of that, I firmly believe that we set ourselves up for failure sometimes with our funding body by segmenting certain parts of what we ask for, making it very easy to then have someone else pick those pieces apart and then deny them in a piecemeal fashion. So if you could expand on that. Have you guys looked at that, or do you have a way to weigh that appropriately and put that all in one big list?
We have. We've not fully included the entire request that would bring us up to standards. I do know that this year we included the $660,000 that was broken out as a separate item. At one point, you remember, we combined it back in with any maintenance money that we would receive. And then at the last board meeting, it was asked to be broken back out, and it is as a standalone item. Our commitment has been, we know those things have to happen, and in some cases, those facilities are in worse shape than our physical plants that we are living and breathing in every day. I'll give you an example. The tennis courts at Columbia Central are maybe to a point that they're beyond repair. It may just be tearing down and starting over. What we did this year, and what I've talked to Mr. Pointer about and Mr. Hall about, is if that item were cut as a standalone item, but we did receive maintenance money from the county in some fashion, there's a certain number in which we would just roll that whole 660 in. But if there's a lesser number that is funded, we would kind of proportion that out and say, okay, we maybe don't have the money now to do the whole 660, but what can we do that we're going to carve away at that list? But moving forward, I can roll that into the full capital request and look more holistically at, if that's a $15 million number that's 3 to 4 years old now, sort of update that and do like we do with the EMG list, where we prioritize, and we do that, we level those things out. We have the EMG list, and then we say this is a level 1, this is level 2, this is level 3, and that list changes sometimes quarterly. But we can do that with the athletics and just roll that in.
Well, I would say clearly that would be my preference. I would be interested to hear what other board members think on that. I mean, I wouldn't hate to speak. I don't get to speak for the entire board, but I think, and honestly, the central tennis courts are a good example of that, because frankly, it would be a shame if we had to just bulldoze the entire facility because we, as a county, chose not to maintain it like it should have been maintained. And I would hope that by including those things and not letting them get picked apart, that we could then keep things moving and not have any facility that gets to that point.
I would take just a second to echo some of what Mr. Lindsay said and then expand upon it. I helped build the dugouts at Cox Middle School. We raised money for it, we bought the block, we laid them, and that's just how that was. I told you we played without dugouts the same way and put ropes up around so parents couldn't get into the dugout, right? A lot of our current facilities are facilities that were left at the creative process of the coaches and the staff at that facility to build. Yeah. If you go back to Spring Hill High School and look at everything that's up there, it was built by the staff that was there at that time. Mr. Callahan, that's now retired, built the restrooms. Mr. Slatton used to drag the infield of the softball field with his Saturn car. If you go to Mount Pleasant, until we built Spring Hill Middle, we had never holistically looked at facilities. We did that again at Battle Creek, but you remember that Battle Creek was from savings. It was an afterthought. It wasn't something that we did on the front end. Hopefully we did a better job with that, but I think that one of the big things that we have in meeting those standards is not just saying we're going to put bleachers on or we're going to light. It's the physical surface, the drainage. We've mentioned we have horrible drainage on the softball field at Spring Hill High School, and that's because it was just something that was left to the staff to figure out where to put. And those types of things can eat up capital money at a rapid pace, is just correcting the wrongs that were done, but not wrongs through any fault. It was just people having to figure out how to do things. And I think as we move forward with this, we have to run that balance between where do we go in and sometimes start over versus we go in and we do. It's kind of like the EMG money. We've done millions of dollars worth of work to improve our facilities that you don't see. We do in the grand scheme of things, a rather small flooring project at Baker, and we get 1,000 times more comments on that because it's visible. And I think that as we start looking at our athletic facilities, that's the first thing we have to do is say, what is the quality of the actual playing surface or the field or that type of thing before we expand upon. And I think that's a long answer to saying we can get into it, but internally that's a real problem. We can put a new stadium around Spring Hill High School's football field. There's still surface issues there that probably are more of a safety issue to students than many of the other things that we could do that people would see and say, oh, that's great, they did that. It's getting that core corrected before we expand into the other.
All right, thank you.
I would like for that to not be consent. I have an indirect interest in that, so I would need to remove myself from that vote if possible.
3.34 is exterior LED lighting conversion at Spring Hill High School. We've done the bulk of the district through EESI grant or through the loan with them. We left Spring Hill High School out, and this is something we've talked about we're trying to correct moving forward. We left it out with the uncertainty of what was about to happen in the next year to 2 years, and we just came back and said this was a mistake on our part. We have the money to fund this. It will not cost you anything other than money that's in our 177 sitting there for this type of thing. But this would bring them up to the same LED standards that we've just brought the rest of the district up to. 3.3.5 is Battle Creek land conveyance to the county. This is the first step, and I'll defer to Mr. Wooliver for any additional information on this. The bridge and the completion of Battle Creek Way, that work has been completed by the county. It's my understanding, Jake, you correct me, that we need to formally adopt and accept that road and that bridge, and that begins the process of actually transferring that land, the roughly 95 acres that we're exchanging in swap for that project over to the county. But we do have to accept that on the front end and say that we're good with it before we can move forward. Is that correct?
That's right. We're waiting on a legal description for the property that you're going to convey. Your letter of intent said that you, well, it's got a provision that says the property will be used for public park or similar recreational purpose. I'm going to put that restrictive covenant into the deed, so you guys are going to quit claim that over once you approve the bridge. So what you'll actually be voting on is just the approval of the bridge and the roadway as constructed. And then that'll trigger us to go to the next step, get a deed signed.
Well, I know I'd reached out to Mr. Perrin about this, and the roadway and bridge looks very nice. I really, really wish we had caught this before they striped it so that we could have a safe walking path for kids between the two schools, but I understand that in talking with some people at the county that there may be some solutions to that moving ahead. But other than that, it is a very nice roadway, and I think it's gonna be a safe way to get between these two schools and make sure everybody can travel nicely there.
It's pretty impressive. We still are maintaining it where we're closing it right now, to the general public just because we've not kind of decided and gone through that transfer over to them. I've spoken with some of the commissioners and folks about an alternate, travel path that we may be able to create there.
Question for Mr. Wolver, and I know I'm coming in on the back end of this. A lot of this work got done before September, but is there a purpose in that deed restriction as far as public park property or?
No, and honestly, that was requested at the time when we did the letter of intent. You typically put that in situations where you give the property away. This is a little bit different in that you're getting a little bit of a quid pro quo. You're getting the roadway and the bridge. So the only thing I can answer is that it was requested by the board at the time that it go into the letter of intent. You guys don't have to hold to that now if you don't want to, but that's the way it was set up. I'll put it in there. If you tell me to take it out, I'll certainly do that.
I'll just give my opinion. With what I do, from time to time we deal with properties and deed restrictions that get placed on things 50 years ago. The intent was good, but 50 years down the road they become a real stumbling block and make things really difficult. And just my opinion, I don't know why we would put. I don't see the benefit for the school system to put a deed restriction on that piece of property. It's in the floodplain. It's not. There'll never be houses built there or anything of that nature. So I just say that, maybe saving somebody headaches years and years down the road, whatever they're trying to do with that property.
I would
I think that was the reason, actually.
I would take just a second to say, again, you guys decide on that. We're dealing with a deed restriction on the Water Valley Community Center right now that was deeded over to the Water Valley Community group down there roughly 50 or 60 years ago. They are wanting to put a roof on the building, but are wary of the deed restriction because it states that we can reclaim the property as a school site. It's not where we would ever want to be. It's not enough land. I've tried to assure them of that, but that restriction, and again, that's just, we know that we're dealing with a situation right now that's 50 to 60 years old.
Mr. Moore.
Mr. Lindsay, I would generally agree with you on that. The concern I've had is just in recent months, we have had county commissioners that have mentioned that the potential of selling some of that property off for commercial purposes, and that's the only concern I would have. I agree that most of it is in the floodplain, probably not likely, but and if maybe a different wording would make more sense, but make sure it's for the public use in some format. That would make me more comfortable. But that's the only hesitation I would have with it.
Mr. Lindsay, I'll just, as an employee of the Parks Department and at current funding levels, our next topic is a farm lease. That property will probably remain a farm lease for the distant future would be my guess. I mean, I'm just trying to, it doesn't matter. It's not gonna change my mind one way or another on it. I just wanted to give everybody something to think about, that deed restrictions just aren't. They have good intent, but sometimes they come with bad consequences in the end.
Thank you. Are we clear to put this on consent agenda? Yes, no? Yes. Yes, okay.
3.3.6 is the farm lease. This is the standard lease that we've operated for the last 3 to 4 years with Mr. Steve Baker, who has rotated corn and soybeans on that property. The agreement this year is one that we would accept and then with the transfer of the land, it would transfer to the county. I have spoken to a representative of the Parks Department, and they're good with this. They think that it would be a good deal. We would at that time determine the acreage that remains with us, because part of where they would be planning would remain with us. We would determine that, and then the price that is agreed upon would be divided out based on that acreage to the county and then to us as well. But it's the standard farm lease that we've operated under.
Okay, move that to consent. All right, next.
3.3.7 is, it was posted as you guys are the only ones that can see that. And this is just, and I'm fine with you unveiling it. I just didn't want to tell the number until you guys had time to see it and to go with it. I was asked to get an appraisal on the McDowell property. We did complete that. You will see the attached appraisal and the value of that property. It is there for you, and our only request would be any direction that you have for us moving forward that would involve that appraisal or not. So that's just to start the discussion, and I'll leave that to you.
Mr. Moore.
If I could back up to kind of the process we had talked about, I guess that's really the bigger question is what we had, one of the option that was given to us was to do this as a sealed bid. We set a minimum price, and let it go through a certain open bid process, and then we just take the highest bid above that minimum price. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's correct.
Is that one of the things that I think was the fastest as far as the board is concerned? I know there were other options that would require things to have to come back to us.
Correct.
For us to approve, but that one would not. Once we set that price, we can pretty much let it run, do its course. As long as we hit the minimum, it transfers on and we move on with that.
If you chose to go that route, then along with Mr. Lukonen, Mr. Hickman, and with Jake, we could set that process up, take care of it, we think, and then just come back to you and say it was completed, or that your minimum was not reached.
Okay.
And you need to somehow either decide to take the highest bid or you do it again. But it would be your direction at that point. But I think we could complete it relatively with a low cost and then come back to you. And it could also be just advertising.
So if that were what the board chose to do, I guess we have two things with that. One, the minimum price, and then two, what we do with that money once it's brought back in. And I know there had been different opinions on those various things, but I didn't know what other board members thought. I honestly, to be honest, I don't know what real estate goes for or how to set a minimum price on this. So for me, I think, in my opinion, it's something we need to get that needs to be transferred on out of us. It's just we're not in the business of holding real estate, in my opinion, so we would need to move that on. I have some opinions on perhaps what we could do with some of that money, but I definitely would be interested in what other board members think we ought to do with both of those.
Ms. Irvin.
Of course, I agree with David on that, but curious, have we had interest from other, like the county commission? Because I think I read that, thanks to our good friends.
I've had a couple of conversations with commissioners, and again, I think that's just like you guys. Those opinions fall to the 22 of them. But yes, some are not. I know there's interest from other groups as well.
But would that then still be a part of the sealed bid, or would that be something it would still be? Okay.
I would.
Gotcha. That's why I was curious.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I will say, following, I believe it was the building committee meeting last month, that group anyway made it very clear they were not interested in purchasing. I have been requested to have a meeting with Mayor Mulder next Monday, so there may be some discussion at that point. But I don't know I don't even know the whole topic of the meeting other than McDowell. Mr. Lukonen.
So there is a process that we have to go through with this, and one of the things we have to do, and you have to do as a school board, is to surplus the property to say that we don't need it anymore.
Put on Gov Deals?
And you can actually put it on Gov Deals. Nobody does that, but you can because of the fee. But with it being a sealed bid process, it will be marketed as a normal sealed bid process would normally be marketed. But just be mindful of reaching out to individual parties, because the whole definition of a sealed bid process is that nobody understands and nobody knows what is going to be offered. If basically certain items start to come kicked around, or information of somebody bidding on the building finds out what somebody else is bidding, and because of that information wins the bid, then we could be in some deep hot water. So just be mindful of that process. It's the same way as if we were putting something out to bid, if they wanted to purchase or provide service to us, or provide a product to us. You know, when the Hewlett Spencer, their process, they don't have to follow that process because they're covered under Public Building Authority. But our office, that's why it's a sealed bid process. We can't, you know, get a number and then go back to somebody else and say, hey, so-and-so submitted this number. We'd like for you to submit a higher number if you actually want this project. That is something that we don't have the ability to do within the law. So.
Okay, then let me clarify. My meeting with Mayor Mulder is not necessarily about them purchasing the building. That was never addressed with me. It's about potential uses for the building. So I just want to make that very clear so we don't get ourselves in very deep hot water. Ms. Kinzer?
I agree with David. And going through the bid process, like you said, seal bid, everything. And I don't think there's anybody on this board that can't think of something we could spend the money for. But my husband always tells me that I'm always trying to spend money I don't have. I dream about it and it doesn't always come, right? So I personally think that we should wait till we have a bird in the hand, and then we can prioritize. We've already heard of a project tonight. We know there's many other pet projects and many needs. There is no end to the needs in this county. So I'd rather see how let's move forward, do it like you said, see how this comes out, and then we can have a discussion on how to spend the money.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing no further, well, what are we gonna do with,
Yeah,
where do we go next?
I think we still have to, he at least needs a minimum, if that's if that is what the board's choosing to do.
I think the first thing would be, you would have to declare that this at some point becomes surplus, whether it's the day of exit or whenever it's a surplus item, and then a minimum that we would move forward trying to, that we would post it as part of the bid.
Those be voted on at the next meeting, or is that just something we can chit-chat and decide tonight? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's official.
The surplus typically is voted on, because
Okay.
you're saying you're going to get rid of something. We surplus even small things.
Okay, this will be an agenda item for our May meeting then.
So we will add this as a McDowell, as a surplus item for you to
Yes.
officially vote on.
Yes.
Okay.
And just functionally, we can do that prior to the date we actually are planning to surplus it.
We could vote and say, to
That's
be
fine.
effective on,
Okay. Fair enough, thank you.
okay, but we could deem it to be surplus at a future date. Yeah, okay. All right, Mr. Lindsey.
Mr. Farmer, will you bring us a recommendation of what, or are we gonna get a recommendation of what that minimum is? I mean, I know we have an appraisal on it, but, is that something we're just gonna hash out, or is somebody gonna?
I will do a formal recommendation to you based off of our discussion, and then it's always up to you. I will post that unless you tell me differently. I will post that this way too, that's a for your eyes only, until you get that number, harp over it and discuss it. And again, I took that liberty tonight. I just thought you needed to kinda saturate in this a little bit before everybody else saw what we were looking at. But yes, I can do that. I will get with Mr. Hickman and we can issue a formal recommendation on that.
Mr. Sims.
Is that gonna affect us? I mean, can we keep those numbers from the public, or is that, I mean, I'm just wanna make sure we're doing everything correctly.
Well, you don't have to put the appraisal on the agenda. If somebody files a records request, they can get it. I mean, it's not confidential, but it doesn't have to be published.
But the minimum number also, does it have to
That'll be part of the process, yeah.
That'll be public to everyone.
So you'll vote to surplus, and you'll have to give us some direction on method of sale. And assuming that's a private bid, a sealed bid, then you'll give us a minimum and all those things. But yeah, that part will be public.
The other only item that I would see along with, and that would go with the direction on how to do this, would be the date at which by you would want us to be exited from that property, if you wanted to do that, because we are carrying over certain contracts and certain cost into next school year, into the next fiscal year, that we cannot drop until we exit that property. Insurance costs, we still would have to keep electricity. There's minimum things we would do. So if you do that, then that can help us in the budgeting process as well, if to say this is a realistic date at which we would exit that by.
Mr. Moore?
I mean, I was still relying on staff to be able to tell us what day you guys can be out of there. In my opinion, as soon as you guys feel like you're done,
Okay.
let us know what that date is, and we can sign off on that date.
And I have a date that our departments think, I'll get with Mr. Hickman and Mr. Gaines to make sure that instruction, and the other departments are good with that date, but I'll just include that in the letter, the
whatever day
recommendation.
you guys are done, I think we're ready to agree to that.
Mr. Lindsey?
Yeah, I fully expect in this motion to say that, by whatever method that we decide to sell it, and that it'll be published on this date, and the new owner would take ownership on whatever date, or we would close on, or set some date to close, which would in turn also give us a date by which we would be out. So, I would expect that to be all in the same motion, so.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay. All right, we'll move that to our May agenda then. Policies.
Good evening. The first one is the 3.4.2, the new project planning. That's one that was prior to me, but it's been posted on the website for at least 30 days. So that one, as I believe and understand, you guys, the board has already discussed this, and it was posted on the Murray County website for the public viewing for at least 30 days, so it would just need to be, you guys would just need to approve if that's still what you are wanting.
Any problems or objections with this? Yes.
The date still reflects 2017.
The date itself will be, is the issue date. Once you all pass that, that's the issue date. So if you all put this on for the next actual board meeting, then that's when the issue date would be updated.
Yeah, I'm a little confused here, because we would have already approved this. It just never made it to be publicly posted on the website, correct?
It's been publicly posted on the website, so, pardon me, I mean, maybe I missed something in the transition of me coming into this position, but I was just, I noticed this was on your website, so I was just trying to get it updated to to the actual policies.
Can we hold off on this? I'd like to look into it some more and make sure, remember when we actually, or maybe we can go back and review the meeting on this, because some of this is throwing me off.
Yeah, a proposed policy that was posted for the 30 days notice. It's
Mr.
been
Moore, I
that
think
way.
we did this in November, I believe. It was either October or November. We can go back and pull that up.
Yeah. I'll do my own research before the
So we just
full
wanna
voting
roll
meeting.
this to the agenda but not consent?
If you could, yes, please.
Okay. Put it on the agenda but not a consent agenda. Okay.
The next bit of information is the kids on stage, which was requested by someone else to be placed on to the board agenda. So
This is looking at our relationship with Kids on Stage program. We had asked them to make several changes, or to consider several changes, and they did. You can look through the MOU, you can see the position descriptions. If there's any comments or questions, I can try to help you. They were gonna have a representative here, but I think he had dental surgery this morning, so, did not feel like he would make it. Ms. Kinzer?
So they will be paying their supplemental salary outside of our of us, and as before, we were paying some portion, but now they will pay that directly?
That is my understanding.
And that's why how much they're paying is not in the MOU anywhere.
I'm looking through it, I'm not,
I surfed through it and I didn't see where anybody's salary was listed in there except for the art director, which is, if they're doing that outside of Murray County Schools, paying the benefits, paying, FICA, all of that, retirement, is all of that gonna be paid by them and not any by us?
I can't put words in their mouth, but I can ask them to be here for our May meeting if that would.
I don't, I'm happy with that, if that's the way it is. It's just, the MOU doesn't mention anything other than a job description of each one of those.
I'll shoot him an email tomorrow and
But
clarify that.
I don't know, the contracts, Jake, that we've signed in the past were with each individual person, so we won't be doing that. Okay, so they'll negotiate their own supplement. Okay.
If you look at, the attachment for supplemental position MOU, you know, and that's a direct question they can ask. If you look at page 2, 1.6, that particular says that they would pay all supplemental pay to them.
And I'm fine with them, you don't have to have them come and concur with that. I just wanted to be sure, if you all have negotiated this and that we are not gonna be liable, we don't have to provide workers' comp on those particular, if they're doing something in regards to the kids on stage or any of that we're held harmless.
Now, the only question I would like to ask them, though, is now that they posted the arts director MOU, if this is the current one they want to use, when you look at it, it does read a little something different.
Yes, it does.
When you go to page 1 and you read number 2. It does, that was the only
one I saw.
they read different,
Yeah.
differently there, and I know I sent these to Jake to look over. Do you
His salary's listed as
know why it was written? Yeah.
I can ask. I'll ask. Any other discussion on this, or else we'll take it, Mr. Moore?
Yeah, I mean, along with, Ms. Kinzer, I mean, that was my concern all along, was to make sure that this has zero, and I mean zero impact on the, salary or personnel cost on the school side.
Okay.
And as long as that's met, if they can confirm that, that was my big concern. Now, changing gears, having looked at this, I guess I have my brain spins a little bit on the unknowns here of there not being any knowledge of what they're getting paid or how that may, what that amount is, and how that impacts potentially other schools or other positions. I know that's been a discussion we've had about how these numbers in the past, and I'm not sure making them unknown is any better than having them known but not controlled. So, I may have some additional questions on that, but.
Okay. Any, Mr. Lindsay?
Mr. Wolver, this, so obviously that's, in your opinion, that we're good from a legal standpoint to allow this to happen.
Yeah, it doesn't violate state law or any policy. I mean, you're fine from a policy standpoint. I've looked at it. It's unusual, but it doesn't violate policy.
So to kind of a piggyback off of that, let's say that a booster club wanted to supplement a coach's pay. Would we enter in some similar agreement as this and be okay, or is there any difference in that, or?
You would have to. You've got a policy, 5.607, that talks about other employment, and if it's related to school function or takes place during school hours, you guys are gonna have to approve it. Otherwise, it's gonna be essentially moonlighting and violate your policy. So, yeah, I mean, it could be done, but I think it would have to come to you to get past that policy.
So really, the only reason we're having to approve this is because it is kind of a function of their job, and it happens during school hours.
It overlaps with the duties that you assign your principals
Gotcha.
and other personnel.
Okay, thank you. All right, we will continue this at the next board meeting. Next item.
The next item is to review the out of zone. It was asked by a board member to be placed back on here. It was approved. I think there was some concern about the 5% cap and whether that included teachers, students, the employees, students as well, or were employees, students different?
Okay, Ms. Irvin.
Sure, I don't mind speaking to that. I'm the member that requested such. I understand and appreciate that when this was originally passed, it was to try to control our population of teachers and to control our cost for faculty. I'm a big believer that there's a way, if we think hard enough, that this can be a wash per se, because one student at one school would be leaving to go to another. As a parent, and I know all of you fellow board members are parents, there's a number of factors that contribute to a child's, emotional well-being that a parent knows best, that we cannot individually make those decisions. I've been contacted by a wealth of people, as I'm sure you guys have too. And every situation is just different. It could just be that they grandma and grandpa live across the street where the parents do not. It could be that they've got a sibling attending that school because, like for one, it's a special needs student who's been approved and grandfathered in because of that, but takes comfort in the sibling being with them. Like I say, we can continue to name the reasons. So I would like to personally see us revisit that and remove the 5% cap. I would like for us to, because as a taxpayer, I don't know. I mean, if I can personally guarantee I can get my kid to and from a school, if there's a seat there, I would like for that to be something we do. Like I say, and way I would like to potentially see this changed is if there, and I'd like to hear from you at central office to see if there's maybe like an interactive spreadsheet or some way we can do it, because if the goal is just to not increase our net number of teachers, I think that's doable. I really do. Anyway, I would just like for us to explore more and think, because I know this is impacting a lot of people negatively, and a lot of parents are very distressed about what's going to become of their child's future because of this policy.
Okay. First of all, I think that the 5% should not include staff, parents. I think that's a benefit for a teacher to be able to take their child to school. It's certainly, when I was teaching, my grandchildren got to go out of zone because I was a teacher. The minute I retired, they were kicked out. So, anyway, I'm just saying that, but just at that, I don't know how many at each school, but I do think that's something that a benefit that we should provide. It shouldn't be part of the 5%. I don't know how I feel about the 5%. I absolutely have gotten a lot of calls, as all of you all have. I'm also really shocked that now where I live, which is less than 2 miles to Brown, that I'm now zoned to Woodard so the whole zoning takes a whole new light and everything as to what it is. So I don't know how the 5% will affect a lot of schools, but I think it will affect them. It really will. So maybe we do need to revisit.
Thank you. I know Hampshire's one that I do know, and their junior population of out of zone is 17 this year. With them and their siblings, Hampshire would be over the 5% with just those. And so, I mean, we're talking about pulling a kid out of their senior year from a school possibly some of them have been to since kindergarten. And so, looking at that, I would also like to revisit. If we are hard set on the 5%, I would possibly like to look at, if a school is over, to not accept new out of zones until that 5% is met, instead of just pulling the carpet out from under the parents who have students, multiple students. Obviously, maybe if there's a sibling and an incoming sibling going into kindergarten, that might be a little different. But no new out of zone request accepted until that 5% is met. That might be a compromise that we have to make if we're hard set on a number. Even though if we have space, I still don't necessarily like the number, but if we have to do that, I would be willing to go for that possibly.
So just if I want to summarize what I think I heard you say, more or less grandfathering in the ones that are already there as out of zone, but not accepting any new till we get down to the 5%.
If I have to bend, yes. I would like, if there's room in a school, I don't understand why we can't leave the out of zone limit, or limitless, I guess.
So even if there would be room at 8% out of zone to not mess with it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm
Yes.
understanding what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Howe?
Well, I'll basically echo what's been said here, but I'll throw in some more information. So, I think this fundamentally goes down to what we're doing here. Are we bean counters, or are we trying to educate our children? And what's good, what the best thing about Maury County at this point is the choice. You have the choice to send your child to any school we have. Some of these schools are specialty schools, such as Hampshire Unit School. It's an agricultural school. They have a 3,000 square foot greenhouse. Calliope doesn't have a 3,000 square foot greenhouse. I don't think Central has a 3,000. So these schools are designed to offer different things across the county. If my child wanted to participate in some extracurricular art activities or wants to take AP art, it's not offered at Calliope. It is offered at Central. And if I want my child to be involved in that, I should have the choice to be able to do that. Now, there are other choices. We can stand fast with this, and some of these schools will suffer, and that may be the intent. But some of these parents will just take their child out of public school altogether. They have that choice. They can go to Zion, which is just down the road. They can go to CA. They can go to Agathos. Those are choices. And those are children that we lose. And that's the bean counter coming out saying, that's not just children we lose, that's money we lose. And I feel very passionate about this because why would we limit the choices of our children? Why are we limiting those options? Because we're afraid that we may have to add a teaching position at this school or a teaching position at this school. Who's to say we wouldn't have to add those positions otherwise, because we're getting new students every day. So I personally would like to remove the 5% altogether. Our school level administrators can tell you to the seat how many children are in each grade level, and they know when they can accept or deny a child based on the room that the capacity that they're given. Why are we taking that away from them? We do not know what goes on in those schools day in and day out, but those school level administrators know exactly what's going on. They know how many children that they need to have room for new growth in those areas, and they know exactly how many children that they can take. And I, for one, think that they need that tool.
Thank you. Ms. Irvin?
Mr. Hickman, Mr. Gaines, I apologize. I probably should have called you before now instead of putting you on the spot, but I also, I'm very passionate about this, as you know, but I also appreciate what we're trying to do and keeping our funding and our tax dollars at good work. Do you know how hard it would be to create some kind of interactive, per se, like this is just me thinking way outside the box, but like interactive spreadsheet to where principals could kind of tentatively look at how their numbers would fall? Because, and I've never done an out-of-zone form, like for instance, I don't know if a junior leaving Hampshire would then be going as a junior to Central. But for just as much, like I know Hampshire, a lot of people, that's been a big impact school, I know. But there's a lot of people who are being zoned to Hampshire, I've also heard from, that don't want that. So my thing, I just think it's really sad that we're telling some kids, hey, you have to go here, and some kids, hey, you can't go there. And it's like, as a parent, I really just want to meet the needs of those people. And like I said, I'm just a big believer it will end up being a wash. And even if that means, for instance, a low school, like per grade teacher population of like maybe 2 to 3 second, third grade teachers, you know, if that's going to save a teacher, like where it was going to be maybe 8 teachers at one of the Columbia, and now they get an extra classroom, but if it balances, so what I'm asking, is there a way to do that, to see that our teacher numbers can balance?
As for an interactive spreadsheet, Mr. Lang has that spreadsheet. I can guarantee you right now of how many students are out of Hampshire, how many students are in Hampshire, and Central or out of Central, and all that. I think I understand what you're asking is be able to let the principals decide if they can take that because of an overage or not. Is that what I'm understanding?
Basically, yes, but also from a staffing perspective. Because I know, like, in our last budget meetings, we've talked about not wanting to employ any more than, like, X number of teachers until there's new growth. Well, trying to satisfy that with the board is, again, I'm just using Hampshire. If Hampshire has to pick up another teacher in a grade level, but let's say Baker is going down in that grade level for that same, you see what I mean? It tentatively becomes a wash.
And that's what our practice was this year, as we saw where one school had a influx of new enrollees and another had a lower one. We were moving those positions over as such. And I'd just like to added as an attachment to this specific one, all of this may be a wash in 2 or 3 weeks. If you haven't read that, that's a Senate bill that they have, it's right now in legislation where we have to continue to take out of zones as long as there is capacity in the school building. So we'll just kind of have to watch and see where that one unfolds anyway. Open enrollment. I need them to define a lot of things they put in these room. And I can ask, because that specific question, the only thing that we've been alerted to is it's basically the way they told us was like when Eric told you the capacity of each building, that's capacity. So we can say for specific, can we narrow that down to specific grade levels and such? I can ask that. Do you have the idea of the bill number on that? I do. It's the attachment on it is I have to look here. It's SB 788.
I just want to ask a quick, I know we got 2 more lights on, but I'll ask it at the end. Mr. Hooper, you got it.
Okay. No, I just have a concern about the longevity of the way this is writed, specifically the way lines 8 and 9 are going to interact with 20 through 24 in terms of priority for out-of-zone students compared to, people who are in zone. In schools that are close to capacity already, and you have people coming into that zone and moving in there, the 5% cap is going to create a lot of kids being bumped back out of the out-of-zone policy regardless, because obviously we can't go over the 5% the way this is stated, and they also can't have priority, so they're always going to be there tentatively no matter what. I found that they kind of contradict a little bit, and that concerns me moving forward. Maybe not for this year, but definitely years 2 through 5, as we are talking about the growth.
Okay, Mr. Lindsay.
I just want to remind everyone that this 5% rule isn't new. It's been here a long time. And we didn't, Mr. Paramount, when you were a principal, it was there. And you hadn't been a principal in 7 years now. So this is not anything new, but I had a parent call me from Hampshire, and I spoke with them, and here's the statement they made to me. I reminded them that out-of-zones were always considered year to year, so if you applied out-of-zone, you were only approved for that year. And they replied to me, said, well, the former director said, don't worry about it, we always approve these. and I replied, maybe that's why he's the former director. But, so this policy or procedure has been ignored, is what it boils down to. I mean, we had, and I hate picking on Hampshire, but that's who we've been talking about, but we had, 120 kids, we have 120 kids somewhere in that neighborhood, 140 out of zone this year, which is, 35 or 40% of their total enrollment, that an administrator has ignored this 5% procedure and has accepted 35 or 40% of their enrollment out of zone, and now we're the bad guys for it. Now, I say all that, I don't have a problem with the 5%. But the fact is, it has been ignored for years and years and years, and now we wind up, and I understand what Mr. Sims said, and I understand the frustration. People that have a junior at Hampshire, and they've been going there for 12 years because we had an administrator that didn't abide by the procedure for that amount of time. And but like I said, I don't have a problem with the 5%, but where we do run into problems, and again, I know I'm picking on them again, but I think the last numbers I saw, we had 27 first graders in Hampshire, and 9 of them were out of zone. So that caused us to have 2 teachers. So if we just go with the policy that says that we won't accept out of zone if as long as we don't have to add a teacher, that's pretty self-explanatory in elementary grades, I think. But it probably gives us more leeway when it comes to high schools. And I hate to assume this, but right now our admin salary schedule, the more teachers we have, the higher the pay for the principals. So may be a reason why we accept a lot of out of zones, because we add teachers and that puts more money in an administrator's pocket. You know? Not picking on anybody, it's just the honest truth of that. But like I said, I don't have a problem if we remove the 5%. I also think we should not count teachers or staff kids. I'll say that because that's a perk, and we shouldn't even think about even addressing that. But I do think that it is important that we, if we're going to have zones, let's have them. If we're not, let's just have transportation zones, and let's don't zone anybody toward a school. But we run into problems where we're having to add teachers, and I like I said, we can remove the 5%, but I hope we keep in that no out of zones can be approved if a teacher has to be added. So.
Okay, I just want to throw out some information. What Mr. Hickman referred to from the General Assembly, this will be voted on tomorrow morning. It's already passed the House. It's already passed the Senate on a 27-2 vote. So I'm guessing it's going to pass the House on a similar. It does leave the education, the district will have to post number of spaces available for enrollment 14 days prior to an open enrollment period. A reasonable number of enrollment spaces each year may be designated for students who have siblings enrolled at the school and students who have a parent who teaches at the school. So that's accommodated for in that as well. So, like you said, this discussion may totally change in 14 hours. Yes.
And what I'd like to add is right now we've told principals to hold off on all of them, just keep them because we have they're still accepting them because we were going to wait on this. So if this is something we need to push off, that's something we'll have to tell the principals and parents as well, that we're going to hold off on signing or approving or denying any of them. If this is something you want to look at or revisit in May. So I just wanted to make that kind of clear.
Well, I think this is a great example of how much we have sweated, argued, studied, researched, and in 12 hours, it may all be for naught, thanks to our state, government.
And I did email all of you on your board, email the link to it.
Okay. I'm not quite so pessimistic about what the state does. I doubt it would be for right now anyway. It would probably be for the next year. But that said, I think there's still kind of quite a bit of leeway in there for us to choose what space is, especially since they don't fund enough teachers in the first place. So I think we have some room there. I just want to go back on this. Part of this that is I've found frustrating about this is we've all had a lot of parents reach out to us, and I know that's been frustrating for parents. But again, nobody's been denied anything yet. And most of the parent comments have been on speculation about they may or may not. And to be honest, if you look at the numbers, I think the 5% is only going to come into play in a relatively small number of schools. It's not going to be every school impacted here. So to me, as a board member, here's one of the things that I'm kind of frustrated. When did we pass this? This was back in November, I believe. November or December? December. Okay, thank you very much. So a concerning thing for me here is as a board, sometimes we take actions and move a direction. And we really haven't gotten any feedback from staff on the viability of this at all. And I'm a little disappointed in that. Because if this is such a big deal, if principals or central office thought this was a big deal, I would think that you guys collectively would come to us and say, hey, we need to fix this before we get to this time. But we haven't had that at all. And on the side, what I have heard is people pretty much being told that we'll just let them sweat it out, and then it'll be. And this is from general people, because this is the way things happen sometimes. Is let the board sweat it out, and then they'll just forget about it or strike it down, and we'll just keep doing what we've been doing. Fundamentally, I have a problem with just doing what we've been doing, which was ignoring policy or ignoring procedure. And while I think Mr. Inlindsey makes a point about the 5% being something we could look at the difference, I firmly believe we need to get to a place where we have some kind of policy, whether it's 5%, 8%, 10%, that's something we need to work out as mainly with some help from the administrators. But I think that's something we do so we can get a handle on what we passed this for, which was to make sure we're not duplicating teaching staff where we don't need to, and to make sure that we can, and honestly, do some planning as far as the facilities are concerned. I mean, one of the things that then when our former superintendent came into play here, he really pushed for the open district concept, and we kind of went with that. But I think it had some unintended consequences in that from year to year, we kind of don't know what to expect, where these kids are going to come from. And I know that's difficult from a planning standpoint, and that in turn becomes difficult from a cost standpoint because planning is dollars here, and that's the difficult thing we have to struggle with. So I think we need to have some kind of policy in place. If it needs to be tweaked, I think that's fine. I would really hope that I would have liked to have seen some principals speak up if they have issue with this, especially the schools that are being impacted, about some suggestions on how to do a better job with that policy. But as far as just not having it at all, I don't think that's a wise choice for this board to do. So I would like for us to discuss it further. I'm a little frustrated right now that we're in the middle of the process where parents have already made their requests, and it's not on the special call meeting for us to make any changes to this policy tonight. So at best, we'd be making a policy change and waiving that in May, which starts to get pretty late. And again, it seems like we've done a poor job of communicating with our constituents about what we're doing.
Thank you, and I just want to add 2 points of information. You guys may have already read all this and know all this already, but I do want to point out this legislation is set to take effect for the 21-22 school year and pursue each year after that. And there is this provision I just ran across: the LEA shall not deny a student who is owned to attend or who was enrolled in the school during the previous year enrollment and attendance in that school. So just that is another caveat in there. Mr. Hooper.
Well, I should have read that because that kind of changes some things. But I think the 5% or whatever number would work, but I think it needs to be flipped as a reserve number. Whereas if you're at 95 in this scenario, 95%, the out of zones would no longer go, because you have to allow room for growth in that area, but also that would give us more flexibility for out of zones. For smaller schools like Hampshire, they can go as high as they need to, so long as their school is still not at capacity. I know in lines 4 and 5 it says like loose language, adequate space. I'm not sure what that like actually is. I know it's defined by the superintendent, but that's not their at capacity as determined by the district. And I think that number is at capacity needs to be stated somewhere, because capacity really shouldn't be 100%. It really shouldn't even be 95%, because that's really more than capacity in terms of livability. You don't want to use most of what you have and then expect that to be comfortable. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Mr. Howe.
And that's actually what I was going to say. 95%, I mean, like I said, I can speak to Culleoka, and that's what you go by. That's what Penny has gone by, and Miss Love, I'm sorry. And, you know, it has worked. That leaves room for growth for students coming in, and that 95% capacity that she uses also includes teachers' kids. So, you know, I think we're looking at it different between a 5% out of zone versus a capacity issue. If you have to add a new teacher in that one spot, I mean, I don't know. The school they're coming from, are we taking one away from there? Possibly. Depends on how that numbers add up. But, you know, if we just reserve capacity for growth, that to me is where we need to go. And I'm okay with putting something in that if you accept one more out of zone and that requires the addition of one more teacher, you know, we don't do that. But I just really want to make sure that our students have the choices to go where they want to go based on the opportunities that we have. We don't offer the same things across this county. We do not have any standardization whatsoever. So to be fair, just to deny someone simply because, well, we have this 5% rule that obviously it wasn't in policy before, or else we wouldn't be putting it in policy now. So it may have been in a procedures manual, an administrative handbook per se, which we have found that many of our policies and procedures don't always match up. So whether or not the rule was followed or not, I don't know. Things can be appealed to the superintendent. I'm sure that many were before previously. Once again, that's why we have a previous superintendent. So I just want to make sure that in the fact we're looking at what's really important, and that's our children.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
Do you have, Mr. Hickman, do you have any idea on which school specifically would be running into an issue with the 5% if teachers, students were not included in that number?
I'll get Mr. Lang to respond to that because, like I said, he has his fingers on every school's.
Woodard would be one that would be impacted drastically. Woodard has done a great job of reaching out to the community. Has a lot of, they recruited a lot of private school students that are in that school now, and many of them are out of zone. A lot of those will not be able to attend with this 5%. So they will go back to where they came from, I'm sure, to their private schools, et cetera. Hampshire is one. And let me explain what we did before, and I think this will really give you an idea of why Hampshire and just maybe two other schools were a little bit above 5%. Of course, Hampshire was greater than 5% by quite a bit. The way we did projections, if a student is out of zone and that student coming to school, keeping the grades up, no behavior issues, the way a student that is out of zone is returned to their school of zone is with behavior issues, attendance issues, or some type of academic issue. The principal will send me, the Director of Pupil Services, that information, and we will discuss, go over it again, And if we deem that that student has not made corrections with intervention with parent, intervention with school, etc., we return that kid. So let's say a Hampshire. I've been in this position for 4 years. If kids are doing what they're supposed to do in a unit school because it has so many grade levels, those students are never returned to their school of zone because they're doing a good job. So when you look at projections and we say 5% of out of zone for next year based on the projection, we always projected out of zone students that would never return back to their school for all schools. So the projections still gave us, so Hampshire's projections each year went up because kids weren't being returned to their school. They were happy, they were doing the work, etc. I'm sure some were. And even before I got in this position, that's the way the projections were created. Since we had the out of zone this year, Mr. Perriman's department, rightfully so, had to find a particular date in December and move every kid back to their school of zone, which gave a lower projection for many students. So since we were trying to do a baseline for where teachers, number of teachers, etc., this is the first year that I've been in this position that our projections are based on not what actually is in the building now, but based on who should actually be in that building for next year. That's why you have all of these parents with the 5%, which we have used. And I must say, since we're trying to do what's best for kids, I'll be the first one to raise my hand that yes, at times I violated my own procedure of 5%. Because of sibling, because of this issue, I had approved a kid going to a school out of zone that may have taken a kid from a school from 4% to 7%. But it hasn't happened in many schools. The Hampshire phenomenon is similar to Culleoka. If kids go out of zone there and they like it, and they start in first grade, if they're doing a great job, they're counted in the projections for the next year. This rezoning that we had to do moved every kid back to where they normally would go, and to try to get in, several schools, probably 6 or 7, are going to be hit the hardest for those kids, juniors, siblings, one's there, and I heard someone say for a special need reason, and the other one was there so that they could be together. Well, one is there because of the special needs program is there, but the other student has been rezoned back to their normal school where they belong. But they have been at this other school maybe for 2 years. So we've got two things acting against us right now. The rezoning, and now we've kind of capped with 5% those who were doing a great job, who the principal would normally keep. And we always looked at how many students, and if these extra students would cause us to add another teacher, if it was for a good reason, and it was in the best interest of the students at that school, that would go up to Mr. Gaines' office, before that someone else, and they will make that final decision if we could actually support those students on an appeal going to that school.
Mr. Hickman, do you have something to add?
The first thing I want to talk about, I was wanting to kind of respond to what you said in kind. You know, when we had this discussion back, and I believe it was the November work session, you know, that when I was asked about it, the two policies that I had put in was doing the 90% capacity, and also looking at one that was letting it be discretion of the school superintendent. However, and even Mr. Lang had commented during that meeting of the potential of what this could do. So the board at that time, I believe, chose that we've had this 5%, let's keep this 5%, let's enforce the 5%. So this, if you'll go back to that one, you'll see on the work session where one of them was the 90% capacity is what I had introduced. And I think Mr. Perryman also, if it's okay.
But, Mr. Moore?
I just, if I could still get an answer to the question I had, which was, do you guys have an idea of which schools specifically this is actually gonna impact? If the 5% were to go into place, as is in policy, but we excluded staff children or teacher children?
Yes, and I'm looking at the last chart that was sent to me from attendance. Woodard actually has 66 kids out of zone, but they got 61 kids that go somewhere else. So it's pretty much a wash.
Okay.
The ones that are out of bounds are Hampshire, to the positive with them gaining children, and E.A. Cox losing children. Those are the two biggest ones. Also, Baker comes in there, just to the amount of teacher kids. Teacher kids are gonna add a teacher to Baker, no matter what. I mean, if you take them out of the 5%, you're gonna add a teacher or two, depending on grade level, to Baker, just on the front end. Culleoka has a large out-of-county population. They have a good many that leave and come as well. Whitthorne has a high number. Central High School is the other one that has the high number. So the ones that are most out of bounds are Hampshire, Cox, Baker, Central. Culleoka's not that far out of bounds if you look at who leaves. And that's one thing that we're not balancing when we talk about how many students they have. Most of these have a pretty equitable number that go somewhere else as well. Now, those may be teacher kids or a parent works in a different municipality, but the ones that are the most glaring are those that I just mentioned.
If you don't mind, if I could kind of carry that on, if those are the, let's say the 1, 2, 3, that's essentially what, 6 schools. Is that right? 6 schools, is really where the issue is here, where that 5% is. So then, if that's the case, what is a number that starts to get us, that maybe you guys could work with, that does come closer to address that, but still meets the spirit of where what this was put into place for?
Without giving a number, let me just point this out. 1% at Central is 14 or 15 kids. 1% at Highland's 3. So a family moves into Highland that's got 3 or 4 kids, and they went up at 1%. So coming back from Labor Day on the long weekend, all these folks behind you will tell you that's when a big surge of folks come from out of state. You may pick up 10, 12 kids or 8 in a day, and you go up 2 or 3% just in one day. So if you want to look at, you've got to determine whether you're going to do it on a straight percentage or if you're going to say a capacity. You know, at one point in the past, we worked to 90%. You couldn't go above 90% because you needed 10% growth. Again, 10% at Central is, 150 kids. At Highland, it's 30. So you've just got to pick a number at some point where you're going to be comfortable with that, and then also take into account, and this is the hardest part of it, the further north you go, Spring Hill Elementary, 5 kids is 1%. By the time school rolls around in the fall, you may have 250 to 300 new dwellings with kids in them. That's not taken into account in April when you're taking your out of zone. So you may see a huge surge. And I know this, and again, this is not throwing shade on anybody in the past. We've never made a kid move because we had to add a teacher. Now, we may have made a move because they acted bad, but every single time in the entire time I've been an administrator that I know, one kid, we've hired a teacher. So at some point, to reverse that, even if you don't set a number, you just have to say you got to go back. If we go up at Spring Hill Elementary in true zone kids and you're out of zone, are we going to hire a teacher just for that child? But I don't know. I mean, we went through this at length, so you're picking up where you left off as far as that discussion.
All right. Mr. Lindsay was first, and Mr. Howe.
Mr. Lane, this is not directed to you personally, because you didn't, somebody signed off on any of your recommendations, what I'm about to say, but policy, the former policy, not the one we approved in November, October, whenever it was, said that out of zone was good for 1 year. Mr. Lane just said once a kid got in a school, we approved it every year. It's a violation of the policy. just a total ignoring of the policy. And again, maybe that's why the guy's not here anymore, but, I've said this about all of our policies. I'm not sitting here saying that every one of them are absolutely right, but it's what we gotta live by. Once we find out that it's not right, then I expect staff to bring us a recommendation that tells us, hey, here, this doesn't work, and here's why it doesn't work, and I think at least 6 of us out of the 11 will probably agree with that, and we'll move on. But to totally ignore policy and totally ignore procedure, I can just tell you that that's a total disrespect for this board. And if this policy or any policy doesn't mean any more than that, don't waste my time with it. But to sit here and say that we knew this is what the policy was, but we thought it was better for us not to do it, that's not your place to do. And I hope moving forward with any policy, again, not saying that all of them are absolutely correct. What's correct today might not be correct next year, but with any of this, these are the policies. This is what we have to abide by. If they need tweaking, bring them. We'll tweak them. But to totally ignore them is just way out of bounds as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Howell.
I believe he said he included them in the projection, not ignored the policy. The students still have to follow procedure. They still have to follow out of zone
Correct.
form every year. So I mean, just because
Correct.
they include it in a projection doesn't mean that they're violating policy or just totally negating it. They just include them in projection. We'd have projections every day, and they're wrong because we don't meet the projection or we overshoot or undershoot. It's a projection. That's not a violation of policy. But regardless of what we're doing, we need to make sure that, number one, I want to stress this again, it's in the best interest of the child. Some children do good at Central, some children don't do good at Central. They need to be at Hampshire or they need to be at Culleoka. And at the bottom line, at the end of the day, that's what we need to really be focusing on is what's best for the children. And if we're not doing that, then I don't know why we're here.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hooper.
Well, I was just gonna say that if you do include them in projected enrollment, that does effectively change the policy because 5% is based off that projected enrollment. So if you keep adding them in, that 5% number is now, in all respects, a completely different number than it would have been had they been corrected. I don't know what's right or wrong. That was probably while I was still in high school, to be honest. But I mean, that's the fact of it. And so I don't like that in terms because that does change the entirety of that number. I don't see that. And I mean, I went to a unit school and I went there all 13 years as well. But I don't see that because if you're not zoned for them, you're not zoned for it. You don't become a part of the projected enrollment just because they typically do that. I don't like that kind of like logic because it doesn't flow for me.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hickman, and I guess I'm just stuck on this legislative piece. How quickly do you receive updates or guidance, I guess, regarding changes in legislation? Because it's gonna take effect pretty quick.
The majority of what I get is from TSBA, which most of the time is the same that you guys get, and when a bill is passed, usually by the end of the day, they give us all alert, you get them.
Okay.
So,
Because, I mean, there's provisions in this that a window has to be open 30 days prior to school opening, and that's...
correct. Open it, doing it again. And I'd like to comment, Mr. Lindsay, I agree. You know, my job is to enforce the policy of the board, hence that's why we're talking about 5% right now, because we are intending on enforcing it because it's the policy. And like I said before, did I like it when it was written? No, I was pushing, let's go with the 90%, told you why, but that's the policy I was given, and hence now we're where we're at because I'm enforcing it.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Moore, is this on the attendance policy?
It is, yes.
Okay.
Does staff have we have an item here that would potentially have some action. So I haven't heard a consensus from the board. Does staff have an official recommendation of if you would like this to be changed, what you would like it to be changed to, or are you holding off on this potential legislation to make a recommendation based on that?
I think we can go one of two ways. We can keep the policy as is, but remember, all policies, if a parent wants to appeal that out of zone, the board has the privilege of saying, yes, we will let that student or students go to that school. So that's one option. The board can say, remain with the policy, and we can go with that. That'll add another step to the parent. That's gonna be, you know, kind of your call if you wanna continue that way. The other thing we can do is go back and revisit it, the two policies back, and I stick to them. I would rather have a building capacity, and it's written in there as well, where we'll be watching to say, before you take that kid, we're gonna make sure it's not gonna bump your numbers. And that's what I would recommend, is saying, let's do a capacity number, and then let, our attendance office track that, and when we see a zone exemption come in, we'll be able to say, hey, no, that would make you have to include another teacher.
Two things on that. So, personally, I would be happy to keep this policy as it is and simply have you handle as an employment status for the teachers' children that are there. If you guys could carve that part out, and that would not be considered part of the 5%, and see where that goes. However, I would ask that, depending on how the legislation goes, either if you could draft something for that as soon as possible, or have prepared what you just suggested as a document for us to review for the full board meeting as well, that we could then have at least some options for us to look at, if that's what your recommendation is.
It's somewhat of a ditto, but I think we need to revisit the policy. You bring to us what you think would be, based on what the legislature may do as well, and based on this discussion, how it impacts the school, and bring it back to us at the board meeting.
Obviously, if this passes legislation, it's gotta be drafted toward whatever
Absolutely.
legislation said, and we'll bring that back to you in full reading, because as you're reading it, it's got a lot of nuts and bolts to it.
I guess what I'm hearing is bring us your recommendation based off of life as it is now, and if things change at the state level, bring us the plan of action going forward. All right. Moving on. Electronic device policy.
Yes, I, along with our tech department, had drafted this policy. I contacted TSBA, and they gave me another counties and how they had kind of had their base. So we went with another county's base that had been given to us by the TSBA. We have a lot of devices in our schools with our students, and there's no necessarily policy or procedures for them. So it could be a policy or a procedure if the board so wished it to be.
I'll just start off by saying I would much prefer that this is handled as procedure and not policy. I mean, after reading through this, the detail of this just does not fit into what we should have as board governing policy. This is absolutely just procedure. And I think if you guys can figure out how to, maybe we need a short policy that references procedure in these terms for electronic devices, or we include it under our current policy, which I think covers like cell phones and devices in general, and we reference procedure on that. But this, I just don't see why this should be covered as policy for the board.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, and I want to go a little bit further and talk about cell phone usage in classrooms. I think that now that we have the number of devices that we have handed out, I don't see a reason that a student needs to have a device to supplement their education. So I would like to see something additionally, maybe not in this policy, but with our cell phone policy, addressing that, because students do not need contact with the world 24/7. And I would like to see this something addressed for cell phone usage. They can have them on their persons, in their bag, on a wall, in a shoe hanger. I don't care, but I would like to not see them in the classroom anymore. There's no reason for it. We have paid good money for these devices. There they are. Let's use them.
So, we just kicking this back to them to say bring us, or to handle it procedurally?
Let me ask, and not to step on your toes, Mr. Howell, is that what the will of the board is, to revisit the cell phone policy?
I would like to see them complement each other.
Okay.
However that needs
Okay. Ms. Irvin?
I was just gonna say, from my experience, I think most teachers that my kids have anyway are regulating that rather well. I think that's something that, I mean, maybe we need a procedure, but on the flip side of that, as a parent, if my kids at lunch or in the hallway or not in class, I like to be able to communicate with my kid. So I don't like to have a just no policy at all, because sometimes you just need to let them know transportation concerns or what may, but I mean, I don't know. I think most teachers are monitoring that. Maybe I'm naive though.
Yes.
I would say, one thing as far as like the fees go that were listed in this policy, as I understand, like the board would have to approve any fee that would be put in. Now, I believe I understand now there is some kind of like a non-refundable deposit that parents can place. I mean, Tommy might be able to speak a little bit more to that. But if you all wanted to do a fee, then that would have to be board approved. If you would not like to do it as a fee, I have looked into like the legalities. There are like, they could apply for a waiver. It's not you're requiring the fee, but they could do this, and then that fee would cover different equipment that would get damaged.
I'll just add, we were just trying to piggyback off other counties and some of the things they had in place to, instead of reinventing the wheel, we said, hey, we reached out to Jennifer, said, hey, let's get some ideas, let's get stuff going. So obviously this could still be a procedure. Hey, this is what we're gonna do, but we would still need, the way I understand it, the fees, any fees we'd collect, obviously you guys do the fees, that would have to be agreed upon.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I know once a year we approve individual school fees anyway. I would think that would be the appropriate time to bring us something similar. And I do appreciate you guys bringing that up, but I think that would probably be the best time. We approve all those at one time anyway. As far as that, and I appreciate you guys putting the work into this.
Yeah.
I just, again, preference would be for this to be procedure, and I think that gives you guys a lot more leeway to adjust on the fly without, if you find out something isn't working, you guys can adjust that, and we just approve the concept that there's going to be one in place.
Okay.
And again, if you could please, and to Miss Irvin's point, I know it was before she got here, when devices weren't a standard thing, we put a lot of time into discussing cell phone policies, and we use those as devices to supplement the classroom setting. Clearly, we should be at a point now where that's not a concern, so I think it would be appropriate, to, like you said, to dial some of those back and make sure these are complementary procedures that make sure, and it's something teachers I know have asked for in some settings, to have a little more teeth to be able to ask for those things and feel like they're supported in that.
Direction that we're going with this, we feel good about what we've asked. All right. Support staff handbook update. Any updates?
Yes. I attached the current one and then a draft one. Since they were in PDF format, I couldn't do the red line, but things were highlighted as to what was the differences. In the support staff handbook in particular, there's a few things that are contact information. All the HR staff needed to be updated. There's also a change in the law as to on the page 4, on the replevin law, it has changed to a Class E felony, so I was just trying to update the law and that information. As far as more of the content-wise, well, also, on page 11 is what I have. In going through this, it talks about the work week and not working 40 hours for overtime pay. Board policy also allows for comp time, and so I was adding in what board policy was into the support handbook that talks about the comp time in there. So it's nothing new that the board had approved, it's already board policy. Some of the other changes to which myself, Mr. Lukonen, Mr. Perryman, Mr. Gaines had all gone over was dealing with sick time leave and vacation benefits. And Mr. Lukonen's office helped make some of these decisions, or helped with editing. The sick time benefits is highlighted, the change, no cap for accrual and payout. Unused sick leaves will be accumulated annually is what's highlighted. they will receive 2 personal days if unused convert into sick days. The vacation benefits have highlighted the changes, however, vacation from other districts cannot be transferred in. Just trying to go through and highlight what the changes were. Also, on bereavement leave, this was updating it to be, to reflect actual board policy. That in the handbook it said per year, but board policy is per event. So that was just instead of per year, per event on that update there. And more content. And on the criminal background checks, this handbook said that it would be paid by the Murray County. The person would be reimbursed, but board policy actually just states that the school board may reimburse them. It's not a requirement as what this handbook was stating, so just keeping in line with what board policy was. And then I updated the last 3 pages to the new health insurance marketplace to what's the current one that was updated. The other one was out of date.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lindsay.
Page 14, and this is not a change, but I just saw it at the, support staff, it says will be at retirement will be paid $10 per day for any unused sick days. And I just bring it up because right now teachers get paid $50 a day for every unused sick day. I'm sure there was some reason why at one time they decided $10 a day, but I would just suggest that, it's just as important for Mr. Perriman's bus drivers to be, we do that as an incentive for employees to not use sick days. That's the whole purpose in it. And with the, Mr. Perriman probably would like to not have to drive a bus every now and then, because we don't have enough subs. And I get things happen, but I think that what's good for the goose is good for the gander in that situation. I think we should look at making all of those the same amount.
I would point out, just for clarification, bus drivers are paid out yearly. They carry none over, so they don't carry them to retirement.
Upon review today, and Jennifer and I have talked about this, I have 2 recommended amendments to this. On page 14 is the day of accrual. It doesn't specify when the employee gets to earn these days. Typically, procedure is 15th day of the month, and so we would like that added in on there, on page 14 for when the sick day is accrued. And then on page 18, there's a graph. Well, the policy has been changed to take the cap of 60 days off for max accrued on sick leave for support staff employees. And so we would like for the graph to basically change that to NA because there is no cap. There is currently no cap on instruction as far as that goes. That also can go up as high as possible, and as Mr. Lindsay pointed out, is $50 a day upon retirement paid out.
Okay, thank you. Can that be brought back to us then at the board meeting with those changes? All right.
I was actually going to ask, can we put this off? I'd like to discuss it further at the next work session. I have some more things I'd like to look at and just to have some more time, unless there's a pressing need to do this immediately.
Mr. Conan?
The only pressing need is we're trying to implement Chronos, and so with doing that, we need a policy to be able to accrue days by and to be able to go ahead and set up and move the implementation forward. I don't think May's going to drive May would push us back because we're trying to get people in the system in May so they're familiar with it for when they come back.
So we don't have anything at all in place currently?
We have this in place, but we would have to change for whatever it changed in midstream after implementation, possibly. So it's nothing like we can't change and work around. I'm just saying that is something that it would affect.
Could we do the research between now and the board meeting on the 6th? And
I could. And I was just to go with that. I'm looking at another one here on page 7. Sorry. And we're not charging for any out of county employees charging the 50% rate, are we? Are we waiving that too? Just ignoring it, I guess. Just checking. Page 7. Sorry, I'm on the wrong one here.
think that one on the screen is
I got 2 documents up. Sorry, I may be looking at the wrong document on this one.
different, I believe. Scroll up and what's the title of the one that's on the screen?
Yeah, I fully recognize I may be on the wrong, I got both of them pulled
No, I
up here.
think you're on the one we're discussing, if I'm not mistaken. The one on the screen is different. Yeah, we're still on the
Yeah, this is
support
the
staff.
administrator handbook on the page.
Let me go back and forth. Either way, I mean, if we can talk about that when we get to the next one, it was something I noticed. There's a few more items I'd just like to look through. I'll try to look through those before the meeting if you guys feel like you're ready to go on it.
If you guys will bring those amendments on the support staff, do we need to have the same discussion regarding the yeah, let's go ahead and do it. Administrative handbook.
Okay, with the administrative handbook, it is more of a change to how the policy, how we're accruing the sick leave, personal days and holidays. In particular, for the 12-month administrators, it currently, on the days earned per month, 1 to 4 years it's 1, 5 to 9 years it's like 1 and a quarter, and then it goes up by that by a quarter. The proposed change would be 1 day, then 1.5 days, 2 days, 2.5 days, 3 days. So partly just easier upkeep, I believe, with the Chronos system as to how it's reflecting in there and how employees can take a half a day off and not as they're accruing a 4th day. I believe that was the discussion. And then a change of like how it's accrued on January 15th and June 1st, and the same January 15th and June 1st for principals and for the administrators. And then she'll keep going, the vacation. Upon termination of employment, employees will be paid for unused vacation time that has been earned through the last day of work. However, it's in Murray County's discretion to terminate employees for cause if they have unused vacation time may result. That was a change from the original handbook. Again, for the bereavement, I just changed it to per event instead of per year. That was per board policy. And then, I believe that was all on this one that I had.
Okay. Mr. Lindsay?
It's kind of the same as the last one. I found something that, has kind of been a sticking point for years. Probably me and Mr. Moore, maybe the only two here that sat through this that night, but we negotiated a buyout with a director who had accumulated 125 vacation days or something, and on a 10-to-1 vote, I was the one. We paid him for those because they were able to stay on the books, and we had a policy in place that said we're only going to pay you for 60 days, but we allowed those days to accumulate and accrue on the books. So I would like to see us put something in place to where that we don't have an unlimited number. We put a cap on it, and I know that just going to the county policy, our county policy says that number is capped at 30 days. So you can never have more than 30 days on the books at a time for vacation time. And what we run into, Mr. Perriman's staring at me. He might have a bunch saved up, but what we run into is someone gets ready to retire and they set their retirement date 3 months down the road and they take vacation for 3 months. So I think we need to put a cap on that. Here's what you can accrue up to, and we can discuss and fuss and fight about that number, whether it's 30 or 60. But I think we definitely need a cap.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Irvin?
I would like to think that we would need to stay consistent with what other counties and districts are doing. From an employment perspective, there's a lot of unknown factors that come up. There's surgeries, there's things where people would want to accrue more days. Life has a lot of unknowns. And And here's the thing, I mean, we need teachers in the classroom, and my perspective, and it may be the sole perspective, if someone saves those days to the end, it's still days we ultimately would have paid if they'd have used them. I mean, at least if we know they're retiring, we can properly go through the procedures of hiring someone to replace them. I mean, I know it's a cost, but I don't know. I'd like to have them not feeling like they just have to take the days. I feel like that's what would happen. I think people would just start taking their days, and like I say, from a security perspective, as an employee, I'd like to know that I could bank those for unknown life events, because unknown life events definitely do happen.
Mr. Hickman?
First of all, just so we don't have any confusion, right now, if we're talking about vacation days, only 12-month employees draw those vacation days. Sick days, where you get into, it's kind of a fickle, because it's a state kind of a mandate there where we can't cap, so you can't get any over that.
Yeah, I wasn't referring to sick days at all.
But yes, for vacation days, we do have 10? Okay, we do have a couple, Eric's telling me, that are. But, so, it's very few, and, did you want to?
I was gonna say, and I'm gonna go back to classified, the reason we recommended the removal of the cap of their days was we do have that situation where folks are taking days off not to lose them. And what we said is, we're penalizing our good employees who get to that cap, and we're forcing them to take a day off. Budgetarily, if they take the day off and we pay for a substitute to come in for them, we're paying $50 to $60 on an EA. Whereas if we accrue those days and pay them out at the end, right now we're paying $10 a day. So it's better budget-wise to let them accrue those days, plus it keeps the employee in the building. Now, I will, in all honesty, say I'm sitting on 150 vacation days right now. And I accrue 1.75 a month at the current rate. So, but the way I have to know that is I know I'm only going to be paid out for 60, and every time I'm off, I take vacation days. But I don't know what you do to offset that, because do you just at some point say long-term employees, you no longer get this, with some penalty or whatever? But in all honesty, as you said, I was staring, I am sitting on more than 150 vacation days.
Mr. Lindsey?
Well, and to Ms. Irwin and Mr. Hickman's point, I wasn't talking about sick days at all, just vacation days. But also, along those lines, Mr. Farmer's not listening to me, but I'm not picking on you, and you know I'm not. But this was the instance we ran into. Those days were accrued when, it's like, we'll just use Mr. Perriman as an example. A lot of those days that he accrued were accrued when he was a principal making $70,000 a year. Now, he makes a lot more than that. So we pay those out at a lot higher rate than what they were accrued at. And that was the instance I talked about, that, you know, a lot of those days for that gentleman was accrued at $50,000 or $60,000, and we paid them out at $125,000. So I'm only talking about vacation time here, not sick time. And I do think Mr. Perriman brings up a great point. I don't think we should snatch 90 days away from him. He's operated under this policy, and if he had known we were going to do this, then he probably wouldn't have accrued 150 days. But I think it's something we need to look at, you know, from this date forward, that we don't accrue any more than what you have, and then we set that cap at whatever number it should be. It can get costly down the road. You know, say for instance, Mr. Perriman decides he wants to take 150 vacation days on his way out. That hamstrings us as far as the budget goes. Either we got to come up with extra money, or we got to hold off on hiring somebody in his spot.
I would just say two things. One, those have to be approved. I can't just take them as it's a vacation day. We recently have kind of encountered this situation, and it put a hardship on the folks behind me. They may be nodding or looking down or whatever, I don't know. But we did encounter this where we had someone approve 2 to 3 months worth of days for someone to not come to work. And I think that internally, I can't promise 10 years down the road what people are saying. I don't think anyone in this room right now thinks that that's a good policy or would do that. But it is something that you're exactly right. We've encountered recently, and it puts a hardship on everyone. So, and I will say, from December to now, as my department has taken on sick time or accrual time as we're getting ready to push this off to Doug, we have, and I've said this to Mr. Hickman, to Scott, and to Doug as well, we have lots of issues that have to be cleaned up with, because we do have 10-month employees that earn vacation days. We have 11-month employees that earn vacation days. We have 12-month. We have people who no longer earn vacation days, but they're still on the books because of our policy. We're paying out 4 people right now on this next coming check that earn days that by policy should have been paid out when they left an administrative role. So there are things to fine-tune within there. And again, we were just trying to get this to where when he entered it into Kronos, it was clean data.
Okay,
on the front end.
leads me to my next question. Does this have the same time issue as the other one that we discussed?
We can work with y'all passing something in May. Just know that it would be a change in the
It wouldn't be
software.
passed in May.
Yeah,
If we kick it
passed
to the
in
work
June.
session, it would be passed in June.
Well,
So can we put this on the May agenda, or?
Yeah. I'm fine with doing something in June if we need to talk about that, but I would much rather have it approved
I'll
in
tell you
May.
what, let's put it on the May agenda for the board meeting. If we don't like what we hear, we'll kick it back to work session.
And one thing, I don't know that if it was mentioned on the administrator time off or the leave accrual, is that those balances they were changed to accrue at a faster rate, but it's only because they were at 1 1/4 day or a quarter day, and so that needed to be changed to where it lands on a half or a whole, because that is how the policy asks to take time off.
Okay.
So a quarter day doesn't do them or us as a school district any good when we have set up time off in the past on half and full days off.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moore?
Can we, if it's gonna be on the next agenda, which I would still prefer this go to the work session next, 'cause I think there's more to be done here.
We'll still have that option.
But, can we have these done as redlined, PDF documents to go on the board agenda by that time? Just so we can see the changes. We just talked about like a half a dozen things here, plus what's already in here, which is, I know she went through, but, could we have those as actual readable documents showing the changes?
It's highlighted.
One thing to bring
Okay.
up, the only copy of these that I've ever received was in PDF, and so that's why it looks so nasty. And Jennifer and I have you found a Word document?
I have
of it?
found one of these in a Word document since fourth, but let's see, which
We're
one
a
was
school
it?
system, don't we have the technology to convert this to OCR and convert it over? I would think so.
You can convert it, but it still looks messy, so
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Other business, instructional low bids, purchases over $10,000. Any conversation we need to have regarding these?
Some are ESSER, others are just the annual low bids that we do every year, our renewals. Some are, you'll see that they're funded with ESSER funds. All of those, all the bids you have are in line with the, the application that you approved, according to that, funding guideline we did back a few months ago.
Okay. Consent? Okay, I see heads nodding. Consent on all those under number 1. Looking at number 2. Any comments we need to talk about?
For operational, 2.1 and 2.2 are just renewals on our current contracts and bids that we have. It's a formality we need you to do so that we can go ahead and budget those or pull POs for next year. And then point 3 is the E-rate funding proposal, and Mr. Schuyler's here to talk to you about that.
Okay.
So the main point I have to make is that all this is contingent upon budget passing. Basically, we filed for $2.1 million from the federal government to upgrade our entire network. We bid this out using the state and federal mini-bid process, working with Doug Luconan's department. All that was done. Vendors bid. A bid was, again, that's who we are recognizing to win it. Saturday at 1:30 a.m., we were awarded the money. So we get $1.7 million. We're responsible for the other to make it up to 2.1. But ultimately, this is just saying, hey, if the budget, this is all contingent upon budget. Everything we say, we award a bid, nobody's getting anything until a budget is passed. It would still come back and be like, hey, this is what we're doing. When the money came and things were being purchased and moving forward, you all would be notified.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion, any questions? We good to move this to consent? Okay, moving it to consent.
And point 4 is just the hotel cost for the Tins Road Conference for the Sheriff's Department and for the school system. We cover that cost for them. As we travel, it's roughly around 65 folks. It is over 25,000. That's why we need your approval.
Okay, thank you very much. These will be moving to consent. Item number 3, discussion of the agenda, MCEA presentation. I've had several concerned board members over the way things have gone the last several months, just regarding the time that we spend during the meetings on those portions. Would anybody like to start the conversation? Ms. Kinzer.
I've heard board members say to me the concerns, but I want to remind board members that when MCA makes a presentation, it is one person. I personally think Ms. Inc. has done a great job of that this year, because it seems to me her predecessor was always pretty negative, and I think she's tried to bring a broad spectrum. I know the other night was kind of tough, but you have to remind board members that you have a sign-up sheet that anybody can sign up to anything that's on the agenda. By allowing MCEA to be that one spokesman, give them 5 minutes, they cover whatever. If you want to take them off the agenda, then you would possibly have many 5 minutes or many 3 minutes or whatever it is. I don't have a problem with it, and I know that some of the members were concerned at the presentation last month. I personally enjoyed it, but that's just me. I think that they represent the majority of teachers. I would like to hear their concerns. I would like to hear their needs. I think it's important that they're on the agenda.
Well, thank you, and in all fairness, I've been hearing these now for several months. Is there, Mr. Lindsay?
I think Mr. Hooper was first,
He's his mouthful of pizza. Mr. Hooper?
Then I'll go. So I haven't really been here, obviously, that long, and I think you guys do a great job. But that being said, I do have a concern that since you are broad in the way that you talk, and that's great, I do worry that maybe some teachers aren't coming up to talk outside of what you're talking about just because they think you're going to cover what they think. And, not that that's necessarily a problem, but I think more representation from more teachers, and I don't know if that's a problem, they're not wanting to talk, but if it is a problem, and I'm not sure there's a way to know if that could actually be what's happening. But I would prefer to at least try it. I don't think there'd be a problem with signing up every single time you come to every meeting. I'm talking directly to you because you're sitting there. But I just don't see what the difference between having to sign up like everyone else and not having to sign up or being on the agenda automatically. I don't see there being a difference in it. And if there is some sort of latent positive consequence, then that's a benefit as well.
Well, and I guess I haven't been sticking to the 5-minute segment, so I need to probably do a better job of that if we continue this time frame. Mr. Lindsay.
I have had some concerns about it. I begin to question the productivity of it. I also have a concern that we have more than one teachers union in the county, and we only offer one union that opportunity to speak. And actually, I did a little research to find out exactly how many people MCA is representing, and according to the numbers I was given, we only have 240 members in Murray County currently. So, I'm sorry?
397 now.
Yeah, but my point still stands, 397, we have 1,100 teachers, so it's not a majority. I'm sure it was at one time, but it's not, and I've had, teachers tell me this, that their views are not MCEA's views, and there's some concern that the views that we are hearing as a board don't speak for the whole. So, along with that, with all of these things tied together, we have a process and a policy in place by which the public addresses us, and so I think that we should follow that. I heard on a radio show a former board member, he said this, and I never thought about it this way, but he said that board members are in the public but not for the public. And if you really think about that these are business meetings that we're to conduct business at. We're forced to have them in the public by law, but their main goal is for us to conduct the business of the school system. So,
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
I just would echo what Mr. Lindsey's saying. I would think that, and actually I would prefer to have more teachers sign up to speak at these meetings if they want to have their voices heard. I think we would get, in my opinion, a better cross-section and encourage those teachers to know that their voices can be heard individually. And I think from a productivity standpoint, which is where I would go to, again, with what Mr. Lindsey said, it has always been, and I've brought this up before, that I've been troubled by that we only have the one body that is speaking, and others aren't afforded that opportunity, and I've never thought that was an equal way that we would conduct business. But I would prefer, if we could move ahead, that we would move it to something where it would be everyone has the option to sign up for speak on what is on the agenda, and that could be handled in that format.
Well, just as a reminder, I know it was mentioned a 5-minute limit. When you come in to sign up at the door to speak on an item on the agenda is a 3-minute limit. So that's what we would be talking about at that point. Are we obligated under any of the agreements or anything like that to provide time during the agenda?
It's been a while since I've looked at the MOU, but I don't believe there's a provision in the MOU that requires that.
Is this something we would necessarily need to vote on as a board? I don't believe it is, would we? I set the agenda.
You would just change the agenda.
I never know what power I have and what I don't. It's great to have somebody on, yes, exactly. I'll sit beside you in case I have a heart attack. Okay, yeah, carry your microphone around with you. Actually, Ms. Irvin, your light was on first, I believe.
Sure. I, of course, want to let our teachers know that we value them and want to hear from them. But I do know sometimes it kind of gets to be a bit, rhetorical, I guess is the word. But it would be where if any teacher wanted to come and approach the board, if they had a pressing issue, they could contact you and request that time. So it's not really that we're denying that time, it's just that we're targeting that time.
Exactly. And
okay.
Yeah, let me clarify that, because there are two methods to gain access to speak during a meeting. One is to sign up at the door for 3 minutes. The other is to go through the website, request opportunity to speak, and that gives you the 5 minutes on any item, whether it's on the agenda or not. I do think that you're right. We do want to hear from all of our teachers, and that would include all 1,100 of them. Are there any other lights? Ms. Kinzer, do you have a light on in there? Okay, she says no. Okay, this change will be reflected in the next board meeting. Any other items that we need to discuss? We do have planned a special meeting after this one to make some determinations about the budget. Anything else, or we stand for adjourned? Any motion? Motion to adjourn. So moved. We'll take a 5-minute break and then come back. 9:15. All right, we are bringing ourselves to order. Those that are still out, we'll, let them find their way in. I'm sure this discussion will take probably more than 3 or 4 minutes.
I think we need to be more formal on this one, since we are a special call. Are all the board members here?
Ms. Irvin's still here. I think she may have stepped out for a moment. Mr. Hauser, the only person we've lost from the other meeting is Ms. Parker. We are called to order.
Motion to adopt the agenda.
Have a motion to adopt the agenda, second from Mr. Howell. We ready to, do we need to take a formal vote on this? It is a special called meeting. Okay, oh, there it is. Just popped up. She had stepped out and has not stepped back in yet. I'm just waiting to get the voting results. I'm assuming it passed unanimously. All right. Let's move on then. Our first item on the agenda is the Maury County Public School budget for 2021, 2022. Ms. Kinzer.
If you've been on the board with me for the years I've been on, you know I've brought this up before, but now the state, the federal government is saying to us that we're going to have a $38,000 beginning. And so I've looked at this for years. I brought you the facts. This is how we can do it for very little money. Our beginning right now is $36,839, and if you see step one is $1,758. If we move $1,200 from that $1,758, as you see the next column down there shows what would happen, that would make it $38,039. I assume that we're going to get some money from the state and that we're going to provide some kind of raise for our teachers, and so that would be on top of that. That would make step one after zero $558, which is about comparable to every step. Right now, there are 31 teachers in the T&E that would apply to this year. So the cost of it with benefits would be about, and Doug, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it should be around $43,400. It would make our beginning $38,039 with what, and in addition to that, whatever we would come up with in any addition on a raise. Now, if you really wanted to see the figures, the ones I brought before that show beginning in all the surrounding counties, I have it, and I'll be happy to send it around to you to see. So you can see that we are the lowest. We are actually 91. I don't know, maybe it's on here. We are 113. That would move us to 91. Also, you can look down here at what the steps are and the other counties, and the only one that would have a large step at zero is 1182 in Lawrence County. Now, here's what's happening here. By looking at the T&E over the years, which I've been provided by HR every year, we are having a decline in beginning teachers coming to our county. They're going where they can get a better salary. We're not finding those coming here to teach, and we have a problem. We can't even fill the positions. So for very little money, $43,400, by moving that to step one, we would at least be a little more competitive. Now, I will admit, and you know I've always said this, that we're really good even after year 5 and great at year 10. We rank really well. And yes, we have the best benefits, only subpar to Williamson County. So we have a system that we can offer a lot to, but we've got to be able to attract those teachers. and we've got to be able to attract them by knowing that they can make a living wage. So I would move that we add this to our budget.
I have a motion. Do we have a second on that motion? Have a second. Ms. Irvin,
Well, I mean, I was just gonna second what Miss Betty said. What happens is teachers get comfortable where they're at, and they start gaining seniority, they start gaining, as far as, credibility. And I feel like if we want to make a difference in getting the best and keeping the best, we gotta attract them up front, because what we don't wanna have happen is someone become defined as a really good teacher and start getting, all those, incentives that come with that, and then they never look to come back here, even if this is their home, because I've seen that happen.
I'm sorry, this.
Mr. Lindsay.
Well, I have no problem with this. I think it's a pretty creative idea how to get our starting salary up, and like Ms. Kinzer said, it keeps it, it's really a minimum cost. I mean, we don't know exactly what that cost is, but, it could be a lot less than this, we don't know. But my question is, Mr. Wolver, since this is a special called meeting, and I know we're bound by not adding to the agenda and certain, but are we okay to add this in with this being a special called meeting?
You're still talking about the budget. It's just a change in the budget as presented, so no, you're okay. You started talking about something beyond budget, then we'd get into the issue.
And along those lines, Doug, have we got BP? I'm assuming we haven't, since we haven't seen it. We don't have any BP projections yet, so.
I emailed tonight, and they said, it's our goal to get it to you before the end of the month. I said, it's my goal to, thank you.
So, I mean, with that being said, according to the Private Act, we have to pass something by May 1st, but then we have another month. So it would be my expectation we would revisit, possibly salaries again. He's throwing the hold up sign on me there. Oh, no. Oh, I got you. But, so, I mean, we can, if the state were to send money for raises, we could always go back and amend this, as well. So, but I think it's a very creative way and an inexpensive way to up that starting salary.
Ms. Kinzer, this is only amending step 0, correct? To increase.
Step 0.
Okay.
Moving it from, step 1 to two steps.
Okay, and so none of the steps after 0 would be changed. It would be the same exact.
Well,
okay.
step 1.
Step 1. Right,
Yeah.
step 1, but after 1, no more. Okay. And the 31 teachers, how do y'all know that it would?
Provided by HR and.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
That's the least we've ever had.
Okay.
I'm sorry, my answer, the question's not asked.
No, I just saw this for the first time, so I just wanted, if y'all want to see it put in the budget, I need to know what's going on, that's all.
Mr. Lindsay?
Well, just to clarify, the only step that's being changed is 0. Step 1's not being changed at all.
1,200's taken out.
Well, that's not according to these numbers. It's at 38 for 2021, 38,597.
The salary's the same, but the step.
Look at the one above it as it is now.
But the point being, we're not adding any money to any other step except step 0. And you're not taking it out either. I mean, it does, and I mention that because we don't have to adjust someone that started this year as year 1. We don't have to adjust their salary for next year. No matter whether we change it or not, they're going to get paid the same.
It would only be the budget impact for brand new teachers hired at step 0.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the estimate is that there will be 31 of those, correct? Okay.
And may I apologize for not bringing this to you, because for 3 years I have brought it to you and I've gotten nowhere. so.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Not because of you.
Is there any-
You push the button,
any-
you vote for this thing, not me.
Any further discussion on adding this to our proposed budget? It would be adding a total of $43,400 to our budget. Mr. Lindsay, do you have a question?
Well, I have a conflict of interest. I think I
Oh,
probably
okay.
need to read
Yeah,
my,
go ahead.
and I can't find my statement, so, but, I thought I saved it on my phone, but I have a conflict of interest in the, proposal on which we're about to vote. I pledge that my vote is, only adheres to my conscience and in the best interest of Maury County Public Schools.
Okay, thank you. I believe we're ready to vote. We will be voting to amend the proposed budget. How?
Now, to clarify, we're not voting to approve that budget, we're just voting to.
We're voting to amend the proposed budget by adding $43,400 to reflect an increase in starting salary. Correct. We are only voting to amend the budget. The budget still will not be approved after this vote.
Gotta be crystal clear.
Only amended. What do we got?
She's done.
Okay.
I know the feeling.
That amendment to the budget passes unanimously.
And that's our new number.
And that is our new number. Mr. Laconin, if that can be reflected?
It's reflected.
Oh.
973, 578.09 is the current deficit with the 43,400 included. The other thing is, I wanted to make note, we had a larger deficit than this when we last met. It has changed because, as requested by the board, we looked at the Safe Schools grant, verified the FRC grant amount. We were able to increase our revenue a little bit to offset some of our deficit, so we did get under $1 million now, so that's good news.
I think that's commendable. We have a proposed budget in front of us that's sitting here with a deficit of 97,300, 578 and 9 pennies. Have a motion to approve from Mr. Lindsay. Do I have a second? Second from Mr. Howell. Discussion on the budget as a whole. Ms. Kinzer.
I repeat, I have a hard time voting on a budget that doesn't have a raise for teachers. But if I have your silent word that every penny that's coming to the state will be put in their pockets, then I might go with this. No, you're saying no, you see?
Mr. Laconin, his hand went up.
I can help. The commission is not gonna talk about this budget until May 10th. This is just meeting the Private Act requirement. So, for example, if y'all get BEP back and you want to vote again, before May 10th to send something different to the budget committee, that is an option. So, and she said by the end of this month, and this month is April, so I hope to have it back by then.
All right, Mr. Moore.
To Ms. Kinzer's point, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Ms. Kinzer, I actually, whether I agree with you all the time or not on that, I appreciate that you have steadfastly brought that up each year. I think that is commendable in that regard. I would say, in the time we have coming up as we get some more numbers, if you would like a budget, I would encourage anyone that does to try to we gotta try to find it from somewhere if that's the intention of the board. And I think that functionally for me has been the difficult part, is that we're already looking at, in front of us right now is a deficit budget that we're looking at passing as it is, and that's the struggle I have with where we are. so I can appreciate that you brought that up, and I would hope that if you can find some pennies somewhere in that if we could figure out how to make that happen, that would be a great thing to discuss further.
I have one question. Why are we spending, if we can use ESSER funds for, textbooks, why are we spending 900 and something thousand out of GP when we could utilize those funds?
We were directed by the board to keep that number in.
Even though the ESSER could cover it?
Correct. We brought that up and the board directed us to keep it in.
Okay.
It's my understanding that the mindset with that is if we take that money out now, when next year, when those funds may not be available, those textbook funds may not be reestablished into the budget.
It's not till 2024 that there's another adoption.
And also, you remember, we're obligated to pay that second payment of $800 and some odd thousand to the textbook company for
Okay, maybe
the
that's
second
the
half
reason I
of
was
the ELA.
thinking
So we wanted to make sure we were able to do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with that. I mean, this is a recurring cost. Yes, I know there's another adoption. That money will be spent on something textbook related. Just because we're still playing catch up on other things, health and social studies. Have we gone for science? Did we buy science? Exactly. So I mean, we have fought hard to get that money back in the budget, and that's what it takes to operate our schools. And so I would not want to use one-time money on stuff that's reoccurring. That's kind of I agree with that.
Just a procedural question. Do I have to read my conflict of interest statement again? So every time? Okay. This makes and one more question. According to the Private Act, this has to be by the commission on June 1st. Is that right?
Before June 1st, that's correct. The only thing is that it's gotta get to the school board, to the finance director, which means y'all gotta vote on it before May 1st, and that's in the Private Act as well.
So that's what my question comes from the May 10th. Gotcha. So if we don't wanna call a special called meeting, say we get BEP projections in and we wanna just wait till our next regular scheduled meeting to do it, is there gonna be any heartache from the commission if we don't have it on May 10th?
Well, I mean, it'd be as simple as saying, hey, we'd like to change our budget proposal. Do you mind if we have a special called meeting on a different day?
Gotcha.
And as long as it happens in June.
Gotcha. And
in May, then we're covered.
And one last question. There was a question when we talked about textbook funding out of ESSER fund, whether we could actually do that or not. So have we discovered in the last couple of weeks whether we can or not? I think it's something to keep in mind if this thing gets kicked back.
We can, it's just how we write it.
Well, if we have to, just make sure it's written correctly.
If you notice, I just emailed you the House Bill 777 once again, so if you want to see the actual page where General Assembly is, where he was reading all the good notes, it'll kind of put you in kind of up to date when they're going to pass that hold harmless, which also has that fiscal note of, I believe it's 20 million throughout the state for the teacher increase. That's just FY.
I gotta read this conflict of interest statement again, so. I have a conflict of interest in the item about to be voted upon. I pledge that my vote's guided by my conscience and my decisions only made with the best interest of Maury County schools in mind.
Can I have Brian tell you guys some great news we just heard?
I am still waiting on confirmation on it, but about midday today, the USDA has put out a release that meals will be free till June 30th, 2022. So we are waiting on for the policies and everything else that they usually push out, and it goes to the state and so forth. So, but hopefully I'll hear more in the coming weeks. Well, the revenue side, it just changes where the location of funds will be put, just like this current year.
Thank you. Any discussion on the food service budget? Mr. Lindsay?
One question quickly, I'm sure that you guys addressed it on the Sunday that I missed, but, are raises included in this budget for employees?
Step raises only for us.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I believe we're prepared to vote on the food services budget. This will be a vote to approve or not approve the budget as presented. The food service budget passes unanimously. We have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Howe. Ms. Kinzer.
I want to thank him for pizza tonight. And so next time, what are you bringing?
If you would like another free meal, we're having a budget committee meeting tomorrow night at the full commission meeting. There will also be pizza.
No, it's gonna be leftover pizza.
Yeah, we're looking for the nearest fridge.
Thank y'all for a very productive evening. I know it's almost been 4 hours, but we have got a lot done.